Chapter 41. By now, everyone had come to accept Ye Cheng, the adorable little boy in their midst. He was calm, polite, and unfailingly obedient to Yan Mengqi's instructions, never once creating any trouble for the group. Still, their luck had been miserable for days. Apart from a handful of low-grade spirit herbs, they'd found nothing of real value. Then one afternoon, as they trekked through a narrow forest path, they all abruptly sensed an enormous surge of spiritual energy up ahead. Hearts pounding, they hurried toward the source and froze at what lay before them. "This is a medicine garden," one of Lanyu Palace's disciples whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. Rows upon rows of exotic plants and fruit trees filled the clearing, each one pulsing with potent qi. Glancing around, they began naming off what they saw. Second-tier soul fruit, third-tier Shunyuan grass, third-tier purple sunroot. Excitement ripped through the party. A garden stocked with high-grade spirit herbs and fruits was a treasure beyond imagining. If they harvested these and presented them to the sect, the contribution points alone could secure them cultivation resources for years, perhaps even a decade. Their fortunes were about to change. "Hurry! Gather everything before someone else finds this herb garden." Senior Brother Lan's voice rang out, excitement lighting up his eyes as he motioned the junior disciples forward. "I'll help." Ye Cheng rolled up his sleeves and hurried into the clearing. In less than half an hour, the group had swept the garden clean. Delicate medicinal roots, fragrant leaves, and plump, ripening fruits all tucked safely into their storage pouches. Beads of sweat glinted on their brows as they exchanged triumphant smiles over the bulging sacks. But their celebration was cut abruptly short by a sudden chill in the air. A commanding presence descended before them, a gray-robed monk, his face lined with age, but his posture unnervingly firm. He appeared close to 50, with shrewd eyes that flicked over the gathered herbs as though sizing up stolen treasure. "What a sizable herb garden," he murmured, lips curling into a predatory grin. The monk turned his gaze to Senior Brother Lan and the others. His voice dropped to a low, lethal whisper. "Hand over your storage bags, and I may let you live. Refuse, and you die." With that final word, a crushing aura of Calamity Realm power burst from him. It roared like a tempest, whipping through the clearing and slamming the young cultivators against one another. Their robes billowed, their faces contorted as they struggled for breath under the invisible onslaught. "A powerhouse from the Calamity Realm," one junior disciple gasped, fear wide in his eyes. Desperation rippled through the group. They just finished gathering these precious herbs. How could they hope to stand against such overwhelming force? Was this really just a coincidence? If they'd known what was coming, they wouldn't have been so greedy. They should have stopped when they'd collected half the treasure. But now it was far too late for regrets. Who could have predicted such an outcome? The moment they refused to hand it over, the threat was clear. Defiance meant death. Though the decision stung, Senior Brother Lan and the others dared not resist a Calamity Realm powerhouse. They reluctantly surrendered the remainder. Moments ago, the cultivators of Lanyu Palace had been soaring with triumph. Now their faces had fallen. They had believed that this hall would sustain their cultivation for years, perhaps even a decade. Yan Mengqi had been certain that once she returned from this expedition, she would earn promotion to the inner sect and nullify her arranged marriage. Yet none of their hopes had anticipated this devastating twist. "Why?" A harsh, furious voice cut through the stunned silence. Every pair of eyes turned toward the speaker. Ye Cheng. He stood glaring at the gray-robed monk who had forced their surrender. Yan Mengqi moved to restrain him, but Ye Cheng's anger wouldn't be so easily quelled. Ye Cheng's defiant words sent a collective shiver through the courtyard. Now was hardly the time to challenge a gray-robed monk from the robbery realm. Senior Brother Lan's eyes darted anxiously between Ye Cheng and their would-be assailant. "Young master, please, don't do this. You'll get us all killed." But Ye Cheng, clutching the basket of freshly gathered spirit herbs to his chest, refused to back down. He had risked life and limb to collect those herbs. Why should he hand them over to a stranger? Especially not to a monk rumored to roam the Calamity Realm. The gray-robed monk regarded the boy with cold contempt. By appearance, Ye Cheng could be no more than 5 years old. "And who might you be, brat?" the monk drawled. I'm stronger than you. Ye Cheng shot back, his small frame bristling with determination. No sooner had the words left his mouth than the monk lunged forward, hostility etched into every movement. In his eyes, any who dared oppose him deserved swift punishment. "Get back!" someone shouted. Yan Mengqi's instincts flared. She sprang forward, intent on shielding Ye Cheng. But before she could reach him, the boy blurred into motion, as swift and sure-footed as a cheetah. In a heartbeat, Ye Cheng struck. The gray-robed monk was sent hurtling backward, blood spurting from his lips, his eyes wide with shock. Before he could even brace himself, the boy seized him by the hair and slammed his head into the stone paving with merciless force. Silence fell. The courtyard, once alive with tension, now stood frozen as the fallen monk lay motionless, and Ye Cheng, his chest heaving, stood victorious. Thud! With a hollow crash, the gray-robed monk's body was driven into the earth, burying him up to his chin. For a heartbeat, he stayed motionless. Then silence. "Grandmaster, who are you speaking to?" someone cried out, voice trembling. Everything happened so fast that senior brother Lan and the others scarcely registered it. By the time their minds cleared, the monk lay dead, his head grotesquely tilted in the dirt. The sight sent a chill through every onlooker. They stared at Ye Cheng as though he were a demon in human form. A mere child, no more than 4 or 5 years old, had just felled a Tribulation Realm master with a single strike. What sort of power lurked in that small body? "Junior sister Yan Mengqi," one of them gasped. "Are you certain he's only a child? Not some beast in disguise?" Yan Mengqi's voice quivered. She had never imagined the boy she'd rescued could so effortlessly overwhelm an expert of the Tribulation Realm. How old was he, truly? She recalled their recent flight through the true spirit realm, her frantic efforts to hide him from rampaging creatures. Now, she felt a pang of regret at her own trust. And no doubt Ye Cheng himself was asking, in the depths of his mind, "Who am I? Where am I? What have I done?" Yan Mengqi stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You can dispatch Tribulation Realm monks in seconds. One punch and you'd probably flatten every true spirit realm creature in your path. Why didn't you tell me how powerful you really are?" Ye Cheng shrugged, a playful smile tugging at his lips. "I was worried you'd start fretting over me if I'd revealed my strength. You'd be all alone in the Xuanhuang secret realm." Her cheeks flushed. "That's no warned me. I might have been able to help." He feigned a look of hurt innocence. "But, Sister Yan, you never asked." Mengqi's indignation melted into exasperation. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, at a complete loss for words. Despite herself, she couldn't stay mad at the boy whose calm confidence had just saved her life. Chapter 42. The Burden. Yan Mengqi stood frozen, her mouth agape. She'd assumed Ye Cheng was just a child, no more than 4 or 5, far too young to have begun real cultivation. Who could blame her? In all her years, she'd never heard of anyone so young wielding Calamity Realm power. Yet here he was, as nonchalant as if he'd only sneezed. Burden, she thought, incredulous. A burden that could lay low a Calamity Realm master in seconds? Unbelievable. She remembered something Ye Cheng had told her a while back, that he had a twin sister. "My sister is far stronger than I am," he'd said softly. 100 of me wouldn't stand a chance against her. Yan Mengqi's jaw dropped. 100 of him? Make that 1,000 or 10,000, and they still wouldn't be his sister's match. The raw power he possessed even as a 4-year-old was astonishing. Her mind reeled at the thought of what his twin could do. Nearby, senior brother Lan and the other disciples exchanged stunned looks. Not a single word was spoken, only a heavy silence filled with awe and disbelief. What kind of prodigy and what kind of family had they stumbled upon? Ye Cheng might have been labeled a burden by some, but anyone who underestimated him, or his sister, was in for a rude awakening. Ye Cheng's jaw dropped. If what he'd just heard was true, then his sister's power was on an entirely different level. Not even 100 cultivators of his own strength could stand against her. 5th level of the Calamity Realm? 7th? It was impossible to tell, only that she was overwhelmingly strong. Senior brother Lan and the others stared at Ye Cheng in stunned silence. They had never known him to have such formidable family connections, and they could no longer think of him as a mere child. Even Yan Mengqi's affectionate teasing had shifted to a new, reverent deference. Ye Cheng felt a pang of regret. He missed the way Sister Yan had treated him before, with gentle warmth instead of cautious awe. Turning their attention back to the task at hand, the group filled their storage talismans with rare herbs and healing potions until their bags were bursting. Satisfied, they left the sprawling medicine garden behind. But they had only walked a few dozen paces when Senior Brother Lan's brow suddenly furrowed. "Everyone, stop!" he said, eyes narrowing. A turbulent surge of spiritual energy rippled through the air, jolting them to a halt, and then another, and another. Within moments, Ye Cheng and the others sensed nearly a dozen distinct auras converging on their location, each one rushing toward them like a predator closing in on its prey. "What's going on?" Lan muttered, hand tightening on the hilt of his sword as he scanned the horizon. From Ye Cheng's perspective, the dozens of auras all around them were extraordinarily powerful. Most belonged to Tribulation Realm cultivators, yet he also detected a few far stronger signatures, King Realm experts. And to his astonishment, those King Realm masters were fleeing? What could terrify even the mightiest of the King Realm? "Retreat, now!" someone shouted. Before they could step back, several of those auras cut through the air and descended upon them. Horror and despair twisted the moon-rising palace disciples' faces as though they'd glimpsed some unthinkable horror. "That's the third elder! I see him! And Senior Brother Liu and the others!" They pointed toward a spot not far ahead. A frail, disheveled figure, clearly the third elder, was racing toward them, shoulders shaking with each labored breath. Behind him strode Senior Brother Liu, Yan Mengqi, and the handful of disciples who had split off earlier with Senior Brother Lan. The third elder's eyes widened in terror as he recognized his own sect's members closing in. "Damn it!" he spat, whipping around. But even as he glanced back, he realized his pursuers were gaining too quickly. Ye Cheng couldn't escape. With no other option, he dove behind a jagged boulder and whispered urgently, "Over here! Everyone, hold your breath!" Though the Silver R, moored stone sentinel before them, boasted incredible strength, its spiritual perception was surprisingly poor. That gave them a fighting chance to hide. As disciples of Lanyue Palace, and with Senior Brother Lan a true, fully initiated disciple, Third Elder couldn't bear to see them left stranded. He beckoned Lan and Yan Mengqi into the dark recess of a nearby cave. Lan and Yan Mengqi exchanged puzzled looks but dared not hesitate. They slipped inside, joining Third Elder and Ye Cheng in the gloom. "Quiet now," Third Elder hissed, flattening his palm against his lips. "It's coming." They all strained their ears, heartbeats pounding. Third Elder's gaze locked onto the cave's entrance. Lan and Yan Mengqi followed his line of sight and froze. Outside, illuminated by a ghostly silvery light, stood the stone warrior. Its polished armor gleamed, and in its massive grip was a long, razor-edged halberd. Motionless but deadly, the automaton scanned its surroundings as though it could sniff out hidden prey. Ye Cheng swallowed hard, pressing himself flat against the cavern wall. His pulse thundered in his ears. The seconds dragged on as the stone sentinel's empty eyes swept closer. Every slash of the silver-armored stone figure sent a tide of crimson spraying through the air, each drop of blood a testament to another life extinguished. Swish! It moved with deadly precision, every arc of its weapon leaving a trail of mangled corpses. Hidden cultivators watching from the shadows stared in horror as bodies tumbled lifeless to the ground. One elder gasped, "It's moving through the air. That's a King Realm cultivator." But to everyone's disbelief, this towering stone warrior, its armor gleaming like polished moonlight, effortlessly cut down cultivators whose power should have matched or exceeded its own. In a single sweep, it had already massacred more than a dozen King Realm fighters. When no one remained in its path, it paused as if satisfied, its head turning slowly to scan the surroundings. Silence reigned. Even the third elder of the moon-raising palace and his attendants dared not draw breath. To them, practicing cultivators, even those at the peak of the King Realm, were as fragile as insects before this stone colossus. If it discovered them, instant death was certain. Among the onlookers, Ye Cheng stood motionless, his heart pounding. He had chased rumors of this guardian to the very edge of madness, and now he understood why. The stone figure's power far surpassed that of a mere Xuan king. No, he trembled at the thought. It might even tower into the heavenly King Realm, perhaps edging toward the God King level itself. He swallowed hard, eyes narrowing. This was no ordinary trial. Every step forward meant certain peril, but he could see no other way. The silver-armored sentinel was an unstoppable force, and he would have to find a way to outwit it, or die trying. The silver-armored stone sentinel moved with deliberate, unhurried steps as it patrolled the temple's outer chamber. Then, without warning, a gleaming halberd materialized in its hand and swept through a clump of ambushers. A handful of bandit cultivators, hiding among the fallen stones, were cut down instantly, their bodies dropping silently to the ground. With a single stride, the sentinel closed the distance to a hidden grotto where the third elder of Lanyue Palace and his companions cowered in fear. The elder's heart pounded in his throat. None of them had anticipated such a relentless guardian lurking within the ruins. Just hours ago, the third elder and his escorts had burst into this long-forgotten temple, eager to claim its rumored treasures. They had filled their satchels with jade tablets and spirit-refining pills, congratulating themselves on their haul, until someone accidentally triggered the temple's ancient defense mechanism. In response, the silver-armored statue had awakened, its single purpose to slaughter any intruder. If the elder's party hadn't been cautious enough to slip away before the massacre began, or if they'd lingered to gather more loot, they would now lie silent among the bodies deep inside the temple's dark halls. As the sentinel's unblinking eyes regarded them, the third elder knew they still had little time to escape its wrath. Dong! Dong! The footsteps of the silver-armored stone statue echoed through the cavern, each step sending tremors through everyone's hearts. Ye Cheng's hand clenched around the jade talisman hanging at his throat. He could barely breathe. Suddenly, the statue's gem-like eyes locked onto the small group huddled in the recesses of the stone chamber. With a calculated toss, its heavy halberd spun through the air, aimed straight at Lanyue Palace's contingent. "It's over," someone whispered in panic. "This is the end for us," the third elder sighed, shoulders slumping in resignation. No matter their skill, they couldn't hope to dodge that blow. But Ye Cheng reacted in an instant. As the halberd whistled toward them, he stamped on the jade talisman. The jade cracked beneath his heel with a crisp snap, and a brilliant white light flared from its shards. From the radiance emerged a translucent figure, an echo of Ye Cheng's father, Gu Changqing. Though insubstantial, the specter bore his father's features in perfect detail. At full strength, this projection would only possess 10% of the real Changqing's power, but it was more than enough for what came next. Before anyone could react, the phantom lunged forward and caught the spinning halberd in midair. Sparks flew as stone clashed with spectral blade. The statue's next strike shattered harmlessly against the projection, sending chunks of silver armor skittering across the chamber floor. Ye Cheng exhaled, chest heaving. The talisman's sacrifice had bought them precious seconds. Now, with his father's image holding the line, they had a chance, however slim, to turn the tide. Bang! The halberd's roar filled the air, yet when its silver blade slammed into the phantom figure, it shuddered to a dead stop, unable to budge the slightest fraction. What is that?" a voice cracked in disbelief. "Who is this apparition? How can it withstand the strike of the silver-armed stone guardian?" murmured the gathered crowd, including the bandit monks and king-level warriors who'd escaped the temple's ruins. All of them knew far too well the devastating power of that stone guardian. "Ye Cheng, what's going on?" Yanmenk called out, her eyes wide as she stared at Ye Cheng's jade talisman. Before them hovered a translucent figure clad in ancestral robes, radiating a calm but unyielding aura. Senior brother Lan, the three elders of Lanyue Palace, and every other disciple watched in stunned silence. Ye Cheng's expression remained steady as he met their gaze. He lifted the talisman gently, and the projection shimmered in response. "This," he said quietly, "is my father." A hush fell over the assembly. In that moment, the legacy of Ye Cheng's clan, embodied by this spectral guardian, stood between them and the mightiest warrior they had ever faced. Chapter 43. A wave of regret washed over Ye Cheng's heart. His father had warned him that this jade talisman was fiendishly difficult to refine, so difficult, in fact, that it demanded a portion of his father's own blood essence. It was to be reserved for the gravest emergencies, when one's life hung in the balance. Now, realizing what he'd done, Ye Cheng felt a pang of fear. If his father ever learned he'd wasted such a precious treasure. What? Your father? Someone finally blurted out in astonishment. Everyone froze. The phantom warrior who had just snatched the silver-armored statue's halberd, he was Ye Cheng's father? Senior Brother Liu and the third elder stared blankly, their minds still reeling from the revelation. Only Lan Shichen and Yan Mengqi, who knew all too well how dangerous Ye Cheng's father could be, kept their composure. Yet even they felt tremors of unease beneath their calm exteriors. With a casual gesture, Ye Cheng returned the halberd to the waiting phantom. It hovered in midair, its silver blade gleaming under the chamber's torchlight. Then, without another word, Ye Cheng glanced skyward. 4 spirit swords, each crackling with ethereal energy, plummeted from above, arranging themselves around him in perfect symmetry. Pseudo-Zhushan sword formation, activate, he commanded. At once, the 4 swords whirled into motion, forging a circle of shimmering blades. A soft hum filled the air as the formation came to life, its power radiating outward in ever-widening ripples. Ye Cheng squared his shoulders, meeting the silent challenge of the hall. Whatever awaited them within the Xuanhuang secret realm, he would face it head-on, talisman or no talisman. At that moment, everything about Ye Cheng before them was nothing but an illusory projection, even the Zhushan sword formation he'd summoned. Though its power didn't quite match that of the true formation wielded by his original body, it remained terrifyingly potent. Infused with the formation's energy, the long halberd tore through the void and slammed into the silver-armored stone effigy. A thunderous boom shook the air as the statue reeled backward, its gleaming armor cracking apart. Die, hissed Ye Cheng's projection. In his hand, a spirit sword materialized in an instant. He blurred from sight and reappeared directly before the effigy. With one decisive slash, whoosh, the stone warrior split cleanly in 2, shattering into a cascade of fragments. As the last pieces of the effigy rained down, Ye Cheng's phantom began to waver and dissolve. In a burst of white light, it shot back into the jade talisman resting at Gu Qingchen's throat. By the time the light faded, the talisman's surface was faintly cracked, evidence of the projection's fierce and consuming energy. The silver-armored golem just collapsed like that? Silence and a sense of unreality fell over everyone gathered. The silver-armored stone golem, a construct whose power rivaled even a god king's, had simply shattered before their eyes. Yet when they replayed the moment in their minds, there was no mistake. Ye Cheng's phantom clone had felled the towering creature in just 2 strikes, cleaving it into rubble. A projection, and with such devastating force, if this was all the clone could muster, what heights of power must the original have reached? Third Elder and the other sect elders stared at Ye Cheng as though he were some inhuman prodigy. And if one monster wasn't enough to unnerve them, whisperings spread that his father, too, possessed similarly terrifying might. Though the clone's form remained shrouded in mist, its outline, of a youth scarcely 20 years old, was plain to see. Nearby, a young woman pressed her hand to her racing heart, her face still drained of color. The silver golem had nearly crushed her beneath its iron fists. She'd been certain her life was forfeit. Had Ye Cheng himself appeared in that instant, there would have been no mistaking her relief and admiration at his staggering strength. Isn't she the maid who stood beside that green race? Obed woman Ye Cheng met before entering the Xuanhuang secret realm? A trembling hand clutched the hem of her dress as the maid who had grown up alongside her young mistress whispered, "Miss, the man you're talking about isn't ordinary. He's a monster among monsters." She'd long known her young lady's talents were unmatched, even compared to those prodigies at the very top of the spirit rankings. But after witnessing Ye Cheng's sheer, unstoppable power, the maid realized with a sinking heart that her mistress could never hope to rival him. The thought of how deeply her proud young lady would be wounded if she learned the truth made her hands go cold. At that moment, little Gu Qingchen scampered forward. He planted himself boldly amidst the wreckage of a shattered silver-armored statue, now nothing more than piles of gleaming fragments, and began inspecting the debris with bright, greedy eyes. "He was so strong," the boy murmured, running his fingers over the smooth, metallic pieces. "These armor stones must be worth a fortune." Gather them all, into my storage pouch. I'll bring them to father. With an eager grin, he unpacked his bag and set to work, slipping the precious fragments inside. Though he'd shown such pluck when he snuck out to join this scene, in his heart little Xianxia still trembled at the memory of Ye Cheng's unfathomable might. If his father ever found out he'd slipped into the Xuanhuang secret realm behind his back, Ye Cheng would be in for a sound hiding. At least offering up this precious haul might spare him the beating. Around him, the onlookers' eyes gleamed with envy. Ye Cheng himself wasn't sure exactly what ore he'd mined, but everyone else recognized it instantly: red silverstone. The broken husk of the silver-armored stone golem lay in fragments of that gleaming crimson ore. Red silverstone is an exceptionally rare fourth-rank concentrate, prized for forging royal-grade weapons. Even a single shard can fetch nearly 10,000 spirit stones on the outside market. Here lay dozens, no, hundreds of them. Their combined value was unimaginable, a fortune that could change countless lives. Yet despite their greed, not one soul dared reach for a single piece. The memory of Ye Cheng's blade cutting that golem down was still fresh in their minds. And then there was the jade talisman at his throat. When he'd summoned his projection clone, its surface had cracked but stubbornly refused to shatter, proof that this talisman was far more resilient than any disposable trinket. Whoever wielded such artifacts clearly had formidable backing. So everyone remained silent, hearts pounding, unwilling to risk the wrath of the boy who had just claimed the greatest treasure of the Xuanhuang secret realm. Ye Cheng strode out of the chamber, clutching the crimson-silver stone at his waist. Behind him, the disciples of Lanyue Palace followed in uneasy silence. Not far from the mouth of the cavern, he came to a sudden halt. With a deft motion, he slipped the red-silver gem from his ring and summoned 3 smaller fragments from within. He tossed the largest shard to Xianxia. The other 2 he distributed among senior brother Lan and the remaining companions. Earlier, too many eyes had watched him pry the treasure free. Although he'd managed to bluff his way past would-be thieves, he knew they wouldn't hesitate to strike once he and his friends were isolated. The penalties for harboring a treasure in the Xuanhuang secret realm were draconian. Better to share the risk now than see his allies robbed, or worse, later. He gave nothing to the third elder's entourage or to senior brother Liu. He did not know the third elder, and senior brother Liu had never inspired any trust in him. But Xianxia, Lan, and the others had proven themselves honorable, and right now that was all the assurance Ye Cheng needed. With the stones secured in their own rings, the group melted away from the cavern's mouth and into the misty forest beyond. Each carried a fragment of the treasure, and with it a piece of Ye Cheng's har, Diwan's safety net. Despite his youth, Ye Cheng possessed a keen sense of gratitude and grievance. He never forgot a kindness, and he never let an insult go unremembered. "Sister Yan, thank you for guiding me this far," he said, bowing his head respectfully. "But I must press on alone. I sense my clan's aura nearby, perhaps my sister's blood. I have to find her." He spoke earnestly. Earlier he had detected a faint, residual blood signature, undeniably Gu clan, here in the ruins. He couldn't be certain it was his sister, but he knew he had to investigate. Xianxia, now safely reunited with her sect's elders, no longer needed his protection, so he felt free to part ways. Senior brother Liu and the other disciples watched in stunned silence as Ye Cheng produced several small ingots of lustrous red-silver concentrate and pressed them into Xianxia's and senior brother Lan's hands. 4th-level alchemical ore, an extraordinary gift. The eyes of the nearby Lanyue Palace disciples glowed crimson with envy. They could only gape in regret as those prized ingots vanished into Xianxia's cloak, wishing they had earned even half of what Ye Cheng so generously bestowed. Chapter 44. Xianxia's chest tightened with regret. She didn't resent Ye Cheng for refusing to hand over the money. She hated herself for being so foolish before. Why had she tried to run off with senior brother Liu? If she'd stayed, she might have claimed her share of the red-silver stone. Even if they didn't need the gem themselves, turning it into the sect would earn them a mountain of merit points. Auctioned off, it could easily fetch 2,000 or 3,000 spirit stones. 2,000 or 3,000 spirit stones. No, Xiaochen, this is far too much. I can't accept it. Xianxia said, trembling as she held out the gem, and then carefully handed it back to Ye Cheng. The red silver stone in her palm was a fourth-stage concentrate, worth well over 10,000 spirit stones. As an outer disciple of Lanyue Palace, she received barely a dozen low-grade spirit stones a month from the sect. Something valued at 10,000 spirit stones was an unimaginable fortune to her. If it weren't for you, Sister Yan, I don't even know where I'd be wandering right now, Ye Cheng replied, his tone earnest as he tried to press the gem back into her hands. Please, just accept it. Ye Cheng turned to Third Elder Liu and the other elders, his tone polite but firm. I'll be visiting Sister Yan at Lanyue Palace soon. Don't forget that. On the surface, it sounded like a casual promise. Yet everyone present knew the real meaning. Keep your hands off Sister Yan's red-silver stones. If word ever reached him that anyone had pilfered or hoarded them, he'd make sure they paid dearly. With a respectful nod, he stepped away. Xianxia watched his retreating figure, an unexpected tug at her heart. In the few days they'd known each other, this quiet, well-mannered boy had claimed a place in her affections, almost like a little brother. She swallowed, reluctant to see him go. Meanwhile, Ye Cheng emerged from the crumbling ruins of the ancient palace behind him. His shoulders sagged in disappointment. Not long ago, a brilliant pillar of light had shot up from within those walls, and he dared to hope it heralded some hidden treasure. But when the dust settled, the palace floor was as barren as ever. Still, the old palace pulsed with fierce spiritual energy, and somewhere beyond its broken gates, an unseen guardian stood watch. A presence so powerful Ye Cheng felt its weight even from where he stood. He shook off the ache of dashed hopes. Lanyue Palace, Sister Yan. He would be back, and next time, he'd be ready for whatever waited. Ye Cheng paused at the massive palace gates, the air around him humming with potent spiritual energy. Any ordinary onlooker would swear there were treasures hidden within, perhaps artifacts of fourth or even fifth-tier refinement. Yet the moment he stepped inside, reality betrayed that impression entirely. Scores of treasures floated through the halls, but they flickered like mirages, hollow phantoms without substance or value. He swept his gaze across the empty throne room and then back to the lone figure stationed at the gate. Even the so-called guardian was an illusion, a projection of a once mighty cultivator long dead. Its aura pulsed with the strength of a heavenly king, but that power proved no match for him. Ye Cheng had already dispatched it in a single silent strike before crossing the threshold. He shrugged, sheathing his sword. Nothing real to be gained here, he murmured to himself. Still, this trip to the secret realm wasn't entirely in vain. With that, he turned and strode away from the Phantom Palace, ready for whatever lay beyond. Ye Cheng hadn't expected his enemy to reappear the moment they stepped out. Clearly, this opponent wasn't so easily killed, or perhaps not killable at all. As he surveyed the surroundings, a grim thought struck him. This place must be a hunting ground, designed to trap outsiders venturing into the Xuanhuang's secret realm. Someone had deliberately leaked the aura of hidden treasures to draw in cultivators, then hunted them down. Who had set his gruesome trap, he wondered, but he didn't linger for answers. There was no real treasure here, and every second spent meant more danger. I'm wasting time, Ye Cheng muttered. Let's go. Despite finding little of value over the past few days, he decided to make one last sweep of the underground palace. It paid off. Hidden in a side chamber lay a fourth-level spiritual sword, a genuine king-grade weapon. The glow of its aura sent a thrill through him. Just one fourth-level king weapon would elevate his Jushian sword formation to a whole new tier. If he could ever gather 3 more of the same caliber and forge a mainline sword formation anchored by fourth-level king instruments, his cultivation would skyrocket beyond expectation. Of course, such weapons were notoriously scarce. Still, today's discovery had made the entire expedition worthwhile. With the new sword secured, Ye Cheng stepped back onto the path, determination burning in his eyes. The hunt for king-grade treasures had only just begun. For 2 years, Ye Cheng had relied on the Chenshin Pavilion to dig up any leads, but they came up empty. King-class weapons were legendary for their scarcity, and fourth-tier refiners even more so. And even if he managed to find a master to forge such a weapon, obtaining the raw materials for a king-class blade was another ordeal entirely. It was all but impossible. Disillusioned, Ye Cheng turned away, unaware that shortly after his departure, the solitary guard posted at the palace gate began to shimmer and blur. In moments, the sentry's form folded in on itself, reshaping into Ye Cheng's own likeness. Expressionless, down to the faintest detail, the doppelganger stood poised before the ancient threshold. Inside, immense pulses of spiritual energy rippled through the corridors. "The treasure lies within," the duplicate murmured. An ancient palace steeped in such power, undoubtedly brimming with priceless artifacts. Almost at once, a flood of cultivators answered the call. Though many of them had glimpsed the column of light in the sky around the same time Ye Cheng did, none could match his speed. By the time they arrived, he had already completed his reconnaissance and slipped away into the wilderness, leaving only whispers of his passage behind. When they finally arrived, it was already too late. Ye Cheng knew there was nothing of real value inside. It had all been a phantom. But these newcomers, having never ventured into the palace before, had no way of knowing that. As they stood before the grand gates, their eyes fixed on the lone Ye Cheng posted there, each newcomer quietly weighed his chances. Clearly, they reasoned, this guardian must be the key to the treasure. To press forward, they would first have to defeat, or even kill, him. With every passing moment, more challengers gathered. The air crackled with impatience. Better to break in now, seize whatever lay hidden, and make a hasty retreat before true heavyweights from the King realm arrived and claimed it all. Finally, one man couldn't contain himself any longer. A middle-aged cultivator in a flowing blue robe, a master of the robber realm, drew a long sword and charged straight at the palace gate. Swoosh! Swoosh! He cut a fierce arc through the air, and almost at once, a dozen others surged forward, weapons raised, intent on the same prize. Ye Cheng let out a cold snort. The moment the intruders dared to step into his domain, he swept his sword in a single, fluid arc. An almost invisible blade of light tore through the air, and every monk in its path, each a Tribulation Realm cultivator, was cleaved in two, their bodies collapsing to the ground in a shower of blood. A stunned hush fell over the onlookers. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A Tribulation Realm monk killed just like that? Several blue-robed middle-aged cultivators who had been about to advance froze in place, eyes wide with disbelief. None dared challenge Ye Cheng now. His swordsmanship bore the unmistakable mark of half a King Realm master, if not more. Yet the ferocity of his defense only fueled their greed. If the palace deemed it necessary to station such a formidable guard, what treasures could lie within its depths? Excitement and avarice glimmered in their gazes as they pressed forward, determined to claim whatever riches this place might hold. And so, with the echoes of fallen monks still hanging in the air, the true hunt began. Because of Ye Cheng's reputation, no one dared act rashly, yet nobody wanted to leave empty-handed once the palace guards fell. As the standoff dragged on, more and more formidable cultivators arrived. Half-king experts glided in on chi currents, their auras sweeping the field. Then a hush fell over the crowd as a king-level warrior made his entrance. He was a man in his 30s, clad in richly embroidered brocade robes. Floating down from the sky, he landed lightly among the onlookers, instantly drawing every gaze. "A king-level heavyweight has arrived," someone whispered. "I recognize him," another voice replied. "That's Elder Xianxia of the East Sea Xuanjiao Palace. In his youth, he was one of the most influential figures in these waters." "True," a third observer added. "Though he only recently ascended to the Xuanwang realm, his strength is already extraordinary." Thousands of cultivators from all corners of the Wanyao Sea had gathered, their excited whispers echoing through the grand arena. When he was only a half-king, Xianxia went dozens of rounds without ever being bested by a full-fledged king, one voice claimed. "I heard he can survive 10 consecutive strikes from a king-level powerhouse. That's almost unheard of." "Don't forget how wide the chasm is between a half-king and a true king," another reminded them. "In my book, Xianxia's strength rivals any genius on the spirit rankings," a third insisted. All eyes turned skyward to the impeccably dressed man in brocade robes who floated effortlessly above the crowd. Cultivators who had journeyed from the East Sea, the strongest of the 4 seas, instantly recognized him. A collective murmur ran through their ranks. Xuanjiao Palace, an imperial sect. The revelation stunned the South Sea disciples even more. Of the 4 outer seas encircling the Wanyao Ocean, only the South Sea had remained free of imperial influence. In contrast, the East Sea boasted 2 imperial houses, one of them the renowned Xuanjiao Palace. Now, with Xikongsheng's presence confirmed, anticipation crackled in the air. "How many moves do you think Ye Cheng, our South Sea guard, can hold out against him?" someone asked. 3, maybe? Count 1 strike, if he's lucky. Not a single spectator doubted the unrivaled prowess of Xikongsheng. Among all the cultivators who'd come from the East Sea, Xikongsheng's name shone brightest. Against any semi-king level opponent of the older generation, he was virtually unbeatable, and even when matched with a true king expert, he could hold his ground for over 10 exchanges without losing. Chapter 45. Xikongsheng paid no heed to the crowd's flattery. As one of the last generation's prodigies of Xuanjiao Palace, he'd grown accustomed to praise. He fixed his gaze on the lone guard standing before the ancient palace gate, Ye Cheng, his expression tightening. This Xuanhuang secret realm was fraught with peril. Arrogance born of empty compliments would get him killed. With a single step, Xikongsheng vanished from sight, only to rematerialize directly within striking distance of Ye Cheng. The guard's head lifted, and his eyes locked onto Xikongsheng's. In that instant, it felt as if the god of death itself was staring him down, sending a chill racing through his veins. Around Ye Cheng, the air seemed to ripple and blur, as though reality itself recoiled from his presence. "Not good," Xikongsheng breathed, every muscle tensing. A roaring alarm bell sounded in his mind. He was in mortal danger. Without hesitation, he crushed the life-saving jade slip in his hand. Instantly, a colossal golden shield erupted before him, its surface gleaming with arcane runes. Clang! The thunderous clash of metal against metal echoed through the ancient courtyard as Ye Cheng's weapon met Xikongsheng's hastily summoned defense. Ye Cheng's blade flashed with uncanny speed. Just as Xikongsheng summoned his colossal golden shield, Gu's sword had already driven forward. Bang! The impact rang out as the radiant barrier shattered. At that same instant, Xikongsheng dissolved into a streak of light, slipping entirely beyond Ye Cheng's reach. Having failed to finish off his adversary with a single strike, Ye Cheng made no move to pursue. He calmly sheathed his blade and returned to the threshold of the ancient hall. Inside the courtyard, Xikongsheng hovered in midair, chest-heaving. 2 life-saving trump cards had been his only salvation. Had his jade talisman failed for even a moment, he would certainly have perished. A hush fell over the onlookers. The echoes of conflict still lingered in the air, but none dared speak. All stood frozen, eyes fixed on Ye Cheng at the hall's doorway, awestruck and unsettled by the fierce duel they had just witnessed. Everyone who'd once scoffed that Ye Cheng couldn't survive a single move against Xikongsheng now wished the earth would swallow them whole. How humiliating. A single move? True enough, only the roles were reversed. It wasn't Ye Cheng who'd been overpowered by Xikongsheng, but the other way around. Xikongsheng couldn't withstand Ye Cheng's strike. Had it not been for the 2 jade talismans that saved his life, the Xuanjiao Palace prodigy would have fallen right here. A collective stunned silence hung in the air. This guard's strength wasn't just exceptional, it was absurdly overwhelming. Even the super genius of Xuanjiao Palace had been no match. He'd barely escaped with his life. "Ha! Xikongsheng, what a disgrace," came a mocking voice from nearby. A streak of purple light flashed across the sky and settled in the courtyard. All eyes turned toward the newcomer, a man in flowing violet robes. He regarded Xikongsheng, pale, panting, and wide-eyed, with amusement dancing in his dark gaze. Tianjian sect's prodigy, Jiananxing. Recognition flashed across the face of the East China Sea cultivator. 2 of the region's greatest imperial powers were represented here, the Xuanjiao Palace and the Tianjian sect. And standing before him was Tianjian sect's peerless genius of the last generation, Jiananxing, who, by all accounts, even outshone Xikongsheng. In the East China Sea's hierarchy of youthful talents, Xikongsheng ranked among the very best. But Jiananxing held a status all his own, the undisputed number 1 of his generation. From the moment they first demonstrated their gifts, Jiananxing had maintained a clear edge over Xikongsheng. Back then, no rising star from Xuanzhou Palace dared lift their eyes when facing Tianjian sect's disciples, and as both men matured, the gap didn't close, it only grew. Xikong Sheng had only just advanced into the back Xuanwang realm, while Jian Nanxing had broken that barrier years ago. Today, Jian Nanxing no longer treats Xikong Sheng as a true rival. Their two emperor-level sects have grown openly hostile, and Jian can't resist sneering the moment Xikong steps into view. A flash of cold fire ignites in Xikong's eyes. He hasn't forgotten how Jian nearly bested him last time, even after unleashing both of his secret techniques. But arrogance is hard to shed once you've been Donghai's undisputed #1 among the younger generation. "Oh, is that so?" Xikong challenges, voice low and taunting. "If you're so confident, why don't you prove it?" A tense hush ripples through the onlookers. Everyone senses Xikong is baiting Jian for blood. No one dares warn Jian Nanxing. Such a remark would only draw Xikong's ire. With a mocking, "Watch this, you," Jian Nanxing draws his sword and charges. He hasn't even finished calling Xikong worthless when he bursts forward, blade gleaming in the afternoon light. Ye Cheng, who had been standing yards away, suddenly materialized at his side. No one even noticed when he drew his sword. Chapter 46. Blood trickled from Jian Nanxing's brow, streaking down his face like a crimson veil. In his widening eyes, the spark of life sputtered and dimmed. Confusion, doubt, regret, these tangled emotions flickered through his final thoughts before darkness claimed him. Jian Nanxing, once hailed as the Tianjian sect's greatest prodigy and the undisputed #1 youth in all of Donghai, lay fallen beneath a single stroke of Ye Cheng's sword. The assembled cultivators stood frozen, mouths agape. "He's dead?" someone whispered. None could believe the scene before them. The legendary genius who had humbled every rival was gone in an instant. Stepping over the still form, Xikong Sheng's lips curled into a bitter smile. Even he, ever cautious, ever calculating, had come within a hair's breadth of death at Ye Cheng's hand. It seemed inconceivable that Jian Nanxing, with all his hidden talismans and emergency escapes, had no answer for that one fatal blow. From the edge of the clearing came a cold voice. "All you ever do is talk." Another figure echoed, stepping forward. "Yes, your reputation, your strength, they dwarf mine. But what does that matter if you die first?" The words rang out, sharp as steel. Silence fell. Only the soft rustle of robes and distant birdsong broke the stillness. There was no one else to blame for Jian Nanxing's demise. He had sealed his own fate by underestimating his young opponent. Ye Cheng sheathed his sword, his expression unreadable. Around him, the crowd murmured in stunned awe. A new name had been writ large in Donghai's annals, and Jian Nanxing's star had set forever beneath its glimmer. Xikong Sheng couldn't help but grin as he reflected on Jian Nanxing's fate. His arrogance had been his undoing. Without breaking a sweat, Xikong Sheng had dispatched a man of Jian's caliber, someone who might one day have posed a serious threat to Xuanzhou Palace. Now Jian's body lay cold and still inside the ancient hall. Casting a final glance at the old temple and its lone sentinel, Ye Cheng, stationed at the entrance, Xikong Sheng decided it wasn't worth his time. Even if he lingered longer, he could never wrest the treasures from beneath Ye Cheng's watchful eyes. With that, he transformed into a streak of light and vanished. Word of the hidden shrine and the formidable guardian at its threshold spread swiftly through the surrounding lands. Day after day, hopeful fortune-seekers arrived, drawn by rumors of arcane relics and untold wealth. But each, upon laying eyes on Jian Nanxing's corpse, turned tail and fled. If even a genius of Jian's renown could not breach the temple, what chance did they have? Still, the rumor mill refused to die. Though few dared approach the doorway now, everyone agreed on one thing: there must be something of immense value hidden within those ancient walls. And so the crowd kept coming, if only to witness the invincible guard for themselves. No one dared approach the palace gate. They were forced to stand back and watch. The so-called Invincible sentinel posted outside the main hall had just vaporized a king-level powerhouse without so much as a flinch. The bodies piled before the entrance stood as a stark warning to anyone foolish enough to seek the palace's treasures without the strength to claim them. Many of the fallen still clutched storage rings and bags overflowing with valuables, but no one in their right mind would dare snatch them. Step a foot within the guard's domain, and the only outcome was certain, death. Today, a very special delegation had gathered outside those gates. To their relief, the fearsome protector they faced was only a copy of Ye Cheng, not the man himself. Had the real Ye Cheng been present, he would have recognized several Chengxin Pavilion disciples hidden among the onlookers. "Elder," drawled the third elder of Chengxin Pavilion, his voice low and measured. "I've heard your description. Could that guardian really be so formidable?" If the ninth elder of Qingluan Palace spoke true, then this sentinel's might was far beyond the he ordinary. Even king-level warriors fell before him in an instant. What kind of power could that be? Ye Cheng surveyed the assembled cultivators. Some had reached the heights of Xuanwang perfection. Indeed, a few were even rumored to possess heavenly king-level strength. But two contingents dominated his attention: the disciples of Chengxin Pavilion, led by their third elder, and the adherents of Qingluan Palace, under the command of that sect's ninth elder. Before entering this secret realm, the two sects had struck a simple accord. Should any elder or disciple from one faction encounter a comrade of the other, they were to cooperate and watch one another's backs. In practice, however, Qingluan Palace's master had been explicit. His disciples must spare no effort in sheltering and supporting any Chengxin Pavilion cultivator they met. Reciprocity? That was hardly expected. For all its royal-sounding title, Chengxin Pavilion's king-level reputation rested on little more than the cultivation of a few individuals. In every other respect, lineage, the number and experience of its elders and disciples, it lagged behind even an average king-level sect. It was in no position to rival an ancient powerhouse like Qingluan Palace. Consider the ninth elder of Qingluan Palace. His aura alone spoke of centuries spent refining his art. Opposite him, Chengxin Pavilion's third elder, though talented, revealed by comparison how shallow his reserves truly were. So, despite their treaty of mutual aid, the balance of power was anything but equal. And Ye Cheng, standing amid these formidable figures, knew that the real trial in this secret realm was only beginning. Ye Cheng might be called the ninth elder of Qingluan Palace, but in truth he's a formidable late half-king powerhouse. By contrast, Chengxin Pavilion's third elder scarcely ranks above the ninth level of the Calamity Realm, hardly half-king material. Officially, the two sects are to watch over one another, but everyone knows what that really means. Qingluan's disciples must coddle and protect their weaker counterparts from Chengxin Pavilion. The Qingluan students grumbled privately. They saw no reason to forge this alliance. But when the palace master gives an order, objections are futile. Resentment seeped into their every gesture, from curled lips to lingering glances. The Chengxin disciples felt each slight, yet could do nothing. The gap in strength was simply too great. A stronger sect's disdain was as inevitable as sunrise. "Of course it's true," Ye Cheng, the ninth elder, admitted with a wry nod, "but I've never laid eyes on him myself. I've merely heard the stories." Spotting the pavilion's gate up ahead, he straightened his robes and broke into a brisker stride, determined to see the matter for himself. "Look, we've arrived. Is that the invincible guardian of the ancient palace?" A hush fell over the combined procession of Qingluan Palace and Chengxin Pavilion as the ancient palace, its weathered stone and towering gates veiled in mist, came into view. Standing sentinel before the entrance was a single figure. He looked every bit a statue, utterly motionless, as though carved from marble, his eyes gently closed. And yet his features were impossibly perfect, sharp jawline, high cheekbones, and an aura of cold perfection that drew every gaze. He ignored the assembled crowd, so long as no one stepped into his forbidden domain. Third Elder Zheng halted in his tracks, mouth falling open. He rubbed his eyes as if to convince himself the vision was real. "No, that can't be," he murmured, stepping forward, then abruptly stopping again. Struck dumb, Elder Man Li of Qingluan Palace shot him a worried look. "Third Elder Zheng, why have you frozen?" Disciples from both Qingluan Palace and Chengxin Pavilion each puzzled glances. None dared venture closer. After all, they all knew the legends of the guardian, Ye Cheng, whose slumbering watch was said to be impenetrable. But seeing him in the flesh, standing before the ancient palace gates, was another matter entirely. The newcomers at Chengxin Pavilion stared mutely at the gate. None of them had ever laid eyes on Ye Cheng before, so they were at a complete loss. Third Elder's face went pale. He turned to Senior Elder and stammered, "Senior Elder, is that the guard you were talking about?" Senior Elder followed his finger to the palace gate. There, motionless yet alert, stood Ye Cheng. The Elder gave a brief nod. "Yes, that's him. What's the matter? Do you see a problem?" Third Elder's voice shook. He's the Grand Elder of Chenshin Pavilion." He could scarcely believe it. The legendary Invincible Guard Senior Elder had praised so highly was, by rank and reputation, the very Grand Elder he himself served under? It made no sense, and yet the figure at the gate matched every description of their revered Grand Elder. A ripple of astonishment ran through the assembled disciples from Qingluan Palace and Chenshin Pavilion alike. One bold disciple stepped forward, incredulous. "Third Elder, you're joking, right? Our Grand Elder standing guard at the gate? Surely that's impossible." Third Elder shook his head, swallowing hard. His gaze never left Ye Cheng's silent form. "I wish it were," he whispered. "But there he is." "Don't they look alike?" the Elder murmured, staring back and forth between the guard and the Supreme Elder. The Third Elder's brow furrowed. No, I'm certain. This man may not be the Supreme Elder in person, but his features are identical. It isn't just a resemblance, it's as if someone carved out a perfect replica. A cold thrill ran through the onlookers. Before they could voice their astonishment, a wave of majestic force swept down from above, bearing the unmistakable weight of a peerless cultivator. "A great power approaches," someone whispered. All heads turned toward the horizon. The pressure rolling in was overwhelming, beyond even the mysterious king's domain and squarely in the realm of the heavenly king. In the three-tier hierarchy of the king realm, the mysterious king is merely the entry level. Above it stands the heavenly king, a rank reserved for true titans whose influence defines entire empires. A heavenly king had arrived, and in that charged instant, every person present understood that their world was about to change. Chapter 47. Yuanyang Holy Sect's Young God King. A gasp rippled through the crowd as a middle-aged man in resplendent robes descended from the sky. What? God King? Even those unfamiliar with the Yuanyang Holy Sect recognized the title Young God King. In the absence of an emperor, a God King was virtually invincible, and emperors were rare throughout the boundless myriad demon sea. Rumor held that this particular God King had remained in seclusion for centuries, his power unrivaled in the four outer seas. Whispered explanations passed from one cultivator to the next. The Yuanyang Holy Sect is the premier emperor-level power in the Northern Sea. Although young God King Xiao appears to be only in his 40s, he's actually over 200 years old and has mastered the God King realm for decades. "The mighty God King has come," someone breathed. "This time, the ancient palace gates won't hold." Eyes gleamed with anticipation as the crowd waited to see whether even these fabled gates could withstand his might. Xiao's arrival alone shattered whatever courage the onlookers had left. All the fighters who'd breached the outer guards before had only reached the Xuanwang realm, nowhere near a true heavenly king. But this time, it wasn't just any king. It was a mighty God King, risen into the third tier of the king realm. Even the boldest cultivators dared not hope to seize the ancient palace's treasures. At best, they hovered at a distance, wide-eyed with unspoken curiosity. Without a word, Xiao lifted his hand, and in a single, cataclysmic palm strike sent Ye Cheng hurtling toward the palace gates. The aftershock of that blow alone was enough to erase all traces of life from the immediate vicinity. The press of energy in Xiao's palm eclipsed sky and sun, driving every civilian and minor cultivator to scatter in fear. Ye Cheng lay sprawled before the heavy doors, dust and debris swirling around him. He sensed the raw power descending seconds before it landed, a power that could rend mountains. Slowly he raised his head, meeting the colossal shadow poised above him with neither fear nor awe in his gaze. Then, almost in the same heartbeat, man and sword rose as one from Ye Cheng's hand. The earth split beneath him as he drew a long sword, alive with emerald light. From the fracture in the ground burst that radiant blade, cutting through the air with a thunderous roar. A blazing arc of green energy trailed its edge, announcing that the duel had truly begun, and that no force, not even a God King's palm, would go unchallenged. The enormous blade thundered down, colliding with Ye Cheng's outstretched palm, and the impact shook the world. A deafening roar rippled across the battlefield as every spectator froze. No one believed the young guard could stand against a god king's might. Yet, for a heartbeat, the sword and palm stood locked. Then, as if under some unseen pressure, the radiant palm imprint fractured, splintering like a spider's web, and shattered into 1,000 gleaming shards. A stunned silence fell. Spectators stared in wide-eyed disbelief, their hearts pounding. They had expected Ye Cheng to be crushed instantly by that single blow. Who could have imagined the guard actually gaining the upper hand? This was no mere strike. It was a god king's attack, capable of slaughtering countless Xuanwangs and even imperiling Tianwangs. In that moment, everyone realized how gravely they'd underestimated Gu Yecheng's power. Only a truly exceptional warrior could withstand and even repel such devastating force. In their original assessment, the palace guard's power barely reached Xuanwang perfection, making it highly unlikely he'd ever attain Tianwang. But now, Heavenly King? Laughable. Even a god king, in a direct clash, was thrust into total disadvantage. The enormous palm imprint shattered against Gu Yecheng's defense, and Xiao, the divine king, was slammed backward 2 paces before he could regain his footing. He hadn't expected his attack to be repelled so easily. Granted, he held back some of his strength, but it was still the might of a god king. Interesting, Xiao murmured, the corner of his mouth lifting in a subtle smile. In the next instant, he closed the distance and loomed over Gu Yecheng once more. Their battle erupted in midair with ferocious intensity. Even from afar, the aftershocks of their blows whipped past spectators, drawing involuntary gasps and reddening cheeks. But no one dared look away. A duel between masters at the Shenwang level was a spectacle few ever witnessed. These champions, each the pride of a great sect, rarely acted in person, and even fewer provocations could drive them to unleash such awe-inspiring power. Gu Yecheng's blade met Xiao Shenwang's golden sword with a sound like thunder. The very air around them rippled and cracked. From the ranks of the palace guards came a single awed whisper. Is this truly a duel on the level of a divine king? Xiao Shenwang's eyes blazed. He lunged forward, aura flaring, but Gu Yecheng stood calm and unyielding. With a graceful step to the side, he unleashed a brilliant arc of swordlight that split the air. The shockwave sent the divine king skidding backward, and with a strangled roar, Xiao Shenwang coughed up blood. His power wavered, his golden wings trembled. None of the onlookers had expected the fight to end so swiftly. In mere heartbeats, the divine king was utterly suppressed, forced to beat a bloody retreat. He fled from the marble courtyard, vanishing beyond the ancient palace gates before anyone dared pursue. Gu Yecheng sheathed his sword and closed his eyes, his expression unreadable. Around him, the guards stood frozen, hearts pounding, scalps tingling. A single thought echoed in every mind: Invincible. Even a divine king could not match this palace guard's strength. And if no one here could stop him, then who in the entire Xuanhuang secret realm might? Not the emperor, barred by sacred edict from entering these halls. It seemed the ancient palace's doors were locked to all but one, the undefeated Gu Yecheng. Let me get this straight, the ninth elder of Qingluan Palace pressed. This palace guard, someone who couldn't even hold his own against the God King, is standing watch here, yet he somehow gained entry to the Xuanhuang secret realm? Not even the emperor can breach its defenses. It simply makes no sense. Third elder, are you absolutely certain that this guard truly resembles your sect's grand elder? Chapter 48. This. Even the third elder found himself at a loss for words. I never imagined such a being existed in the Xuanhuang secret realm, nor that even I could be outmatched. Xiao Shenwang fixed a long, unreadable gaze on Gu Yecheng, who stood calmly before the palace gate. Defeat was a rare taste on his tongue. It bit sharply, and he refused to linger any longer. Without another word, Xiao Shenwang turned and dissolved into the swirling mist. His wounds, though not mortal, were serious enough that he would need time and seclusion to recover. Immediately, the assembly of monks that had surrounded the palace broke ranks and dispersed. Not even the God King had found a way inside. Entry remained utterly impossible, unless, perhaps, a true emperor might one day breach this hidden realm. In minutes, the ancient palace lay deserted. The monks departed, disappointed to have uncovered no treasures, but at least free to continue their wider exploration of the Xuanhuang secret realm. With hours still before the realm's closure, their journey was far from over. Only the three elders of Qingluan Palace and the Chenqin Pavilion lingered, exchanging grave glances. Bound by circumstance, they gathered once more to plot their next move. Ye Cheng's thoughts swirled in confusion. He hadn't been able to unravel the mystery imprisoned in the third elder's heart, and he was determined that the next time he met the Supreme Elder, he would demand an explanation. What link could there possibly be between the palace guards here and himself? Why did they look exactly like him? They'd only just left the ancient palace when a young disciple of Qingluan Palace cried out, "Ninth Elder, look, clouds, is it going to rain?" The Ninth Elder, still scolding his followers, dismissed the remark with a snort. "Don't be absurd. Even though we're in the Xuanhuang secret realm, there's no sun to form clouds. How could—" He fell silent, frowning as he peered where the disciple pointed. Sure enough, a dense, inky cloud was drifting toward them. That shouldn't be possible. The Ninth Elder's brow tightened. In all their days here, they'd never seen a single wisp of white cloud, much less a thunderhead. Hold on. Something isn't right. He closed his eyes, centering himself, and pushed his consciousness to its furthest reach. Instantly, his awareness flared outward, probing the strange phenomenon ahead. When the Ninth Elder's eyes snapped open, the divine light was gone, replaced by sheer terror. "No, that isn't a dark cloud. It's a monster," he roared. In his vision, dense, malevolent auras pressed in on all sides, countless of them. Everyone nearby, from the disciples in Qingluan Palace's Chenqin Pavilion to the monks streaming out of the ancient hall, paused and glanced upward. There, filling the sky and blotting out the sun, was a heaving mass of writhing forms. Beneath their feet, the earth trembled with every wingbeat and footfall. "Oh my God," someone whispered, voice trembling. "How many are there?" Another asked, nearly breathless. They could feel it in their bones. The weaker beasts were only at the true spirit realm, but the more powerful emitted Monster King-level auras, and there were dozens, if not hundreds of them. Fear washed over every cultivator present. Faces went pale, hearts pounded in throats. "It's a beast tide, and larger than anything we've ever seen," one elder muttered, backing away. All at once, panic rippled through the crowd. Guards fumbled for their weapons, and monks began to chant protective mantras, but the scale of the oncoming tide was overwhelming. In that moment, every warrior, monk, and disciple knew the same grim truth. This day would test them like never before. How could this be happening? Ye Cheng's heart pounded as he scanned the horizon. Could it be the aftermath of Xiao Shenwang's clash with the palace guards? Someone whispered in disbelief. "It has to be," another voice answered. "We shouldn't have watched that fight. We never considered there'd be hordes of monsters lurking in the Xuanhuang secret realm." Terror rippled through the gathered cultivators. A bone-chilling roar tore across the sky. In that instant, the beast tide revealed its true strength. Dozens of Xuanhuang-level monster kings led the charge, flanked by even more Tianhuang-level overlords. The thunderous alarm sent every creature in the region stampeding toward the same exit, straight at the terrified onlookers. Within heartbeats, the ground shook as the panicked beasts surged forward. Even the Third Elder and Ninth Elder, though both had reached the Tribulation and half-king realms, stood rooted in fear. King realm masters were no better. None dared to move against such a massive horde. Escape was impossible. Ye Cheng swallowed hard. If they stayed, they'd be trampled and torn apart, their bodies left as nothing but a grisly memory. Laughably, the only one likely to slip through the onrush unscathed was King Xiao. "What do we do?" someone screamed, voice cracking. "I don't want to die." "Retreat to the ancient palace," another shouted. "It's our only chance." As the ground trembled with the pounding of countless claws, Ye Cheng squared his shoulders. Survival depended on speed and on reaching the refuge of the ancient palace before the beast tide swallowed them whole. "Quick, let the palace guards cover our retreat through the back gate," someone called out, panic edging his voice. "But that tide of beasts is enormous," another muttered. "Can even our best guards hold them off?" They all knew the palace guard elite were fearsome warriors. Some had even fought King Xiao to a standstill, but this horde rolled in like a living mountain. A frontal assault would shred anyone to pieces, king or commoner alike. "I don't care how strong they are," a third voice cut in. Staying here is suicide. We fall back to the ancient palace. That's our only hope. With that decision, nobody hesitated. The third elder of Qingluan Palace and the ninth elder of Chenxin Pavilion alike turned and hurried along the path they'd come. At the main gate stood Ye Cheng, unwavering and alert. His blade never left his hand, ready to spring at the first beast that dared cross the threshold. Though he remained silent, his presence alone was a barrier no creature would risk penetrating. "Move quickly," Ye Cheng barked. "Everyone else, follow me to the rear courtyard. Guards, form up at the back entrance and hold the line. We'll buy them just enough time for all of us to get inside the palace walls." As the cultivators scurried past him, Ye Cheng shifted into position. Beyond the gate, the thunder of hooves and the roar of snarling beasts drew ever closer, yet inside those aged stone walls lay their only chance for survival. "Don't, under any circumstances, enter the palace. That's our only chance at survival." A hulking Xuanwang warrior's voice carried over the assembly. If they stayed together, they'd be wiped out. Heeding his warning, everyone broke ranks and hurried toward the open ground behind the palace, just beyond the reach of the palace guards' weapons. "All we can do now is pray," someone murmured. "Pray that the guards can hold back the beast tide." Facing such an unstoppable horde, there was nothing left but hope. Helpless, they leaned on the strength of the palace's elite defenders. Night fell in a rush, darkness swallowing the landscape. Ahead of them churned the looming black mass of beasts. Behind them stretched the last thread of clear sky. Hands tight around spears and swords, they braced themselves in anxious silence. At last the moment came. The tide of beasts surged forward and met the resolute line of palace guards head-on. Chapter 49. A tide of monsters surged toward the palace gates, their guttural roars shaking the very air. At that critical moment, Ye Cheng, standing before the gates, snapped awake. His eyes, cold and unblinking, flicked open. Without a word, he summoned the 4 spirit swords anchored around him. They erupted in fierce crimson light. Ye Cheng advanced in a single fluid motion. His long sword carved a brilliant crescent through the horde. Wherever that blade's arc passed, flesh and bone were cleaved cleanly. Hundreds of beasts collapsed in broken heaps. But more poured forward, driven wild by the stench of blood. The wave of creatures swelled, each new surge more frenzied than the last. Still, Ye Cheng's face betrayed no emotion. He moved with deadly precision, every swing of his sword felling dozens, then hundreds. The spirit swords hovered at the ready, their red glow pulsing with each monster dispatched. He fought like an unrelenting machine, his sole purpose to cut down every creature that dared approach. Roar after roar rose from the beast tide, but Ye Cheng's blade never faltered. In that tempest of claws and teeth, only one command echoed through his mind: kill. And kill he did, thousands upon thousands, relentless as the red dawn breaking over the blood-soaked ground. Not a single foe, whether a Xuanwang-level monster king or even one of Tianwang rank, survived his blade. In Ye Cheng's hand, every strike was fatal, felling high-level monarchs as though they were nothing more than grass. When the tide of beasts finally broke against the palace gates, the corpses lay piled so deep that the guards stared in stunned silence. One man, one sword, and not a single monster lived to see another dawn. Cold and unfeeling, the temple guard bore no gratitude or pity, but he hunted down every creature that dared breach the palace grounds. And because of him, every guard and attendant still drew breath. As the eastern sky lightened, the howls and roars faded at last. The onslaught was over, and they had survived. Some of the guards stood slack-jawed, others wiped tears of relief from their eyes. When the moment passed, a hush fell over them, and one by one they bowed toward Ye Cheng, murmuring their thanks to the silent warrior who had delivered them from annihilation. Ye Cheng had never quite possessed an independent will of his own, yet there was no denying the truth. He had saved them. For that alone, they owed him their respect and their gratitude. Not far off, a figure clad in white emerged from the swirling dust. Anyone who saw him would recognize the silvery robes and composed bearing of the ancient palace's stalwart guardian. A tide of beasts? Ye Cheng murmured, eyes narrowing. Could this be the aftermath of the God King's battle? He watched as the monstrous creatures fled, their roars still echoing through the gorge. Over the past few days, Ye Cheng had camped close to this very spot, scouring the ruins for hidden relics. So far, his efforts had yielded nothing but 3rd and 4th grade spirit herbs and a handful of 5th grade scraps that wouldn't fetch much. Then, just hours ago, a pulse of power of God-King magnitude had rippled through the air, tugging at his spirit sensing. He'd wasted no time racing to the source. Now, as he stepped into the clearing, he stifled a laugh of disbelief. He had been here before, in this same cracked courtyard before the ancient palace gates. Back then, he'd found nothing but illusory traps and empty halls. So what had changed in the meantime? And why, now that he'd returned, did he feel a new energy thrumming beneath his feet, one that hinted at possibilities far beyond mere mirages? How could a god-king level cultivator be battling here? Ye Cheng's heart skipped a beat as he forced his pace toward the ancient temple. Moments later, its weathered stone facade loomed before him. Scattered around its crumbling steps, the few surviving monks knelt, eyes closed, quietly drawing on what little spiritual energy they had left, drained by the last onslaught of murder. Aus beasts. Just then, a brilliant white light streaked down from the sky and came to rest above the temple's main hall. The monks froze mid-prayer, heads snapping up as though struck. Ye Cheng, too, found himself rooted to the spot, every nerve thrumming, because hovering beneath that radiant glow was a man who looked exactly like him. At first, Ye Cheng's mind refused to believe it. A mirror image of himself, garbed in the same dark robe, his expression just as steely. But it wasn't a trick of the light or a memory. This was someone, or something, standing guard at the temple gate. No, that couldn't be right. When Ye Cheng had entered the courtyard a short while ago, the gatekeeper was a frail old monk, barely at the Xuanwang realm. How had he been replaced by this doppelganger, this god-king-level figure so uncannily identical to himself? Waves of confusion and alarm washed over him. Something extraordinary and deeply dangerous was unfolding here. And Ye Cheng knew he had to see it through, no matter what. But the Ye Cheng standing before him, identical in every feature, radiated only the power of a god-king, barely 1/10 of his own strength, maybe even less. Could those massive energy surges they'd witnessed during the recent battle between god-kings have come from this same Ye Cheng when he fought other opponents? Ye Cheng's gaze sharpened on the palace guard. Behind him, the recovering cultivators froze in disbelief. 2 identical men? The only difference was that this second Ye Cheng was unmistakably alive, vital and breathing, whereas the figure posted at the gate had shown no trace of life. It wasn't even a living being. What in heaven's name was happening? Grand Elder? The 9th Elder of Qingluan Palace finally found his voice, turning to the 3rd Elder of Chenxin Pavilion. Beside him, the 3rd Elder's expression shifted from confusion to awe. He sank to one knee. It can be none other than him, he declared in a reverent tone. This second Ye Cheng, he is truly our Grand Elder, alive and whole. The one at the gate was merely an imitation, an illusion of sorts, but this man before us is the real deal. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. After all the chaos and unanswered questions, the cultivators now understood. The genuine Grand Elder of their sect had returned at last, Ye Cheng himself. Ye Cheng stirred at the sound of his name. He tore his gaze away from the silent palace guards and drifted toward the figure hovering nearby. 3rd Elder? He asked, astonished. What are you doing here? He recognized that this couldn't be the 3rd Elder under his command. This was far too familiar a face. Since entering the secret realm, Ye Cheng had braced himself for endless days of isolation, certain he wouldn't encounter anyone he knew until the very end. Yet here, confronting him now, stood the only other Grand Elder of Chenxin Pavilion. Ye Cheng! The 3rd Elder exclaimed, genuine excitement lighting his eyes. Around them, several junior disciples from Chenxin Pavilion craned their necks in curiosity. These newer recruits had heard whispers of a hidden Grand Elder, an almost mythical figure in the pavilion's history, but none had ever laid eyes on him. And now, among the ethereal skies and shifting pathways of the secret realm, they were witnessing the legend in the flesh. The 3rd Elder waved off their stares and addressed Ye Cheng in a lowered voice. We arrived only a short while ago. There's much you need to know, both about this realm and what awaits us beyond its final trial. As the disciples exchanged excited murmurs, Ye Cheng drew closer, his mind racing with questions. The secret realm had already tested him in ways he could never have imagined. If the pavilion's other Grand Elder had come here too, then whatever lay ahead must be more dangerous, and more important, than he had dared to hope. The ancient palace stood bathed in an otherworldly glow, its walls humming with residual spiritual energy. Rumor had it that a priceless relic lay buried within, but a lone sentinel guarded its entrance now. "Look," the third elder whispered, nodding toward the figure leaning against the doorframe, eyes closed in apparent slumber. He's the spitting image of the Supreme Elder." Moments later, the third elder hurried Ye Cheng through the tale he'd pieced together. For decades, cultivators had risked and lost their lives chasing after a phantom treasure. Their greed had turned the palace grounds into a charnel house of abandoned spirit cores and broken cultivator talismans. Ye Cheng frowned. "Actually," he shook his head. "I went inside. There's nothing there." A stunned silence fell over the group. One of the younger disciples blurted, You actually entered that palace? And there's no relic at all?" Several elders exchanged glances. They'd witnessed the sentry's prowess in battle. How on earth had Ye Cheng bypassed him? "If you don't believe me, go see for yourselves," Ye Cheng said, stepping forward with calm confidence. He dusted off his robes, fixed his gaze on the ancient doors, and strode toward the threshold. The gathered cultivators hesitated. Would this bold young man prove himself right, or tumble headlong into the fate that had befallen so many before him? "Could you please provide the full chapter text you'd like me to revise? Once I have the complete content, I'll rewrite it into coherent, idiomatic English, rename Gu Changqing to Ye Cheng, male, and polish the narrative for you." Chapter 50. Third Elder's heart pounded as Ye Cheng strolled toward the invisible boundary of the palace guard's hunting zone. Anyone who crossed it was fair game. These sentinels attacked without warning or hesitation. Even though Ye Cheng's face was a perfect match for one of them, the automatons recognized no friend in an intruder. He marched on as if nothing were amiss. The instant his foot stepped over the line, the sentinel's eyes snapped open. Its metal frame lurched forward. "He's doomed," the third elder thought, fear gripping his chest. In the next heartbeat, Ye Cheng's hand shot out. A slender spirit sword materialized above his palm, its blade humming with energy. With a single, graceful arc, he cut through the charging guard. There was no roar of battle, just a quiet pop as the sentinel's form collapsed. Its body disintegrated into a storm of glittering spirit particles that floated upward like embers in the night sky. Emerald flames flickered into being at Ye Cheng's fingertips. "Disperse," he murmured. At his command, the thousands of shimmering motes dissolved, vanishing without a trace. The clearing fell silent once more, as if nothing had ever happened. Ye Cheng's heart hammered in his chest. No matter what, the one who's been impersonating me has to be eliminated. Before him stood a perfect copy. Every feature, every gesture mirrored his own. It gave him the creeps, even knowing it was no living being. "This palace is full of surprises," he murmured. "It can replicate me, but this sham barely possesses a tenth of my true strength." With that, Ye Cheng drew his sword, and in one swift arc cut down the nearest palace guard. The blade was so light, so precise, that it seemed almost casual, but the result was anything but. The guard collapsed as if struck by a thunderbolt. A stunned silence followed, so complete that you could hear a dropped needle clatter to the marble floor. These were the Emperor's own guards, the same warriors who had triumphed over God King Xiao and slaughtered entire tides of beasts. They were supposed to be invincible, impossible to fell unless the Emperor himself gave the order. Yet Ye Cheng had dispatched them effortlessly. The assembled cultivators stared, slack-jawed. How could so mighty a force be cut down by a single swordsman? The discrepancy was unfathomable. For a moment, they questioned whether the guards were suddenly weak, but the doubt vanished as they met Ye Cheng's calm, unyielding gaze. In that instant, they understood they were in the presence of something far beyond ordinary, a terror they could scarcely comprehend. Everyone in the cave fell silent, astonished by Ye Cheng's display of power. Emperor? The word flitted through their minds. Could he really be an emperor? But emperors were said to be barred from entering the Xuanhuang secret realm. If they could breach its barriers, the 3 sea emperors would have arrived long ago. "Go on inside," Ye Cheng called casually. There's nothing left to fear. He swept up the scattered storage rings, bags, and pouches with a single effortless gesture. "I'll take these rings," he said. "Is that all right with everyone?" A tremor ran through the group. "Yes, of course," they replied in unison, voice cracking. "Please, go ahead." Ye Cheng offered them a small, wry smile. "I dare not refuse such generous consent." Who among them would dare argue? They had just watched him cut down royal guards as though swatting flies. None were more shaken than the ninth elder of Qingluan Palace. Only now did he grasp why his mistress had sought an alliance with Chenxin Pavilion. To command, or even to befriend, someone capable of such power, was to stand beside a supremely formidable force. "An emperor," the ninth elder whispered, voice hoarse. "It must be." And somewhere deeper within the labyrinthine passages of the Xuanhuang secret realm, silence reigned under an ever-watchful sky. Ye Cheng squared off against the cluster of blue-robed monks, his gaze as steady as the jade in his sash. He wasn't entirely alone. Flanking him were several disciples from Chenxin Pavilion, and to his right, a small column from Qingluan Palace. Leading that contingent was none other than Yuan Fei, the saint of Qingluan Palace, and one of Ye Cheng's most determined pursuers. Yuan Fei had first crossed paths with Ye Cheng on the third day after they'd entered the secret realm. Since then, despite Ye Cheng's repeated protests that he preferred to explore on his own, Yuan Fei had doggedly trailed him, surrounded by his palace disciples. Claiming he was there to protect Ye Cheng, the saint never let him out of his sight. Of course, in terms of pure strength, Yuan Fei was no match for Ye Cheng. Even as the saint of Qingluan Palace, Fei ranked below some of his own peers, and certainly below Ye Cheng's burgeoning power. Should the tides of battle turn, it remained an open question who would end up protecting whom. Ye Cheng didn't exactly hold any affection for Yuan Fei or the other disciples of Qingluan Palace. In fact, he found their old-fashioned air of superiority downright irritating. Qingluan Palace was an established king-level sect, its prestige far outstripping that of Chenxin Pavilion, which had only recently been promoted to the same status. Time and again, the palace disciples treated Chenxin's members with a barely concealed arrogance that grated on everyone's nerves. Not long ago, Ye Cheng and a handful of Chenxin disciples teamed up with Yuan Fei and a dozen Qingluan Palace cultivators to investigate a newly discovered mineral vein. The deposit was studded with third-grade lath, an extraordinarily lucrative find, so they'd spent the better part of the day extracting as much as they could. Just as twilight began to cloak the mountainside and the group prepared to head back, 4 unannounced figures appeared at the edge of the clearing. They wore simple blue monk's robes, but their bearing was anything but humble. Though only 4 in number, each was a Tribulation Realm monk, a level of cultivation that dwarfed even the highest-ranking disciples of king-level sects. Ye Cheng straightened his spine and exchanged wary glances with Yuan Fei. Whoever these blue-robed monks were, their arrival promised trouble, and everyone here knew a clash with Tribulation Realm opponents would not end well unless both sides approached with extreme caution. Ye Cheng and Yuan Fei were the only 2 cultivators from their side in the Tribulation Realm. The other disciples of Chenxin Pavilion and Qingluan Palace, about 10 in all, remained stuck in the True Spirit Realm and couldn't offer much help. Still, that didn't worry them. Both Ye Cheng and Yuan Fei were prodigies whose strength far outstripped their official realm. If push came to shove, they were more than a match for the 4 blue-robed monks now blocking the pass. "We've been working this lapis lazuli vein all day," Ye Cheng said, stepping forward, his brows drawn together in frustration. "You expect us to hand over 80% of what we've mined? That's hardly fair." The tallest of the blue-robed monks, a young man slightly older than Ye Cheng, stepped forward, a mocking smile playing on his lips. "Fair?" he scoffed. "In this world, justice belongs to the one with the bigger fist." Ye Cheng's hand slid to the white jade hilt of his sword. There would be no negotiation today. Ye Cheng frowned as the blue-robed youth laid out his terms. "Fine," he said slowly. "You can have the unexploited vein. After all, your miners have already stripped 4/5 of it. But claiming 80% of what's left is highway robbery. You'd be forcing our people to work for nothing." The youth's lips curled into a mocking smile. "I'm being generous already," he he replied. 20% is more than fair. And don't say I didn't warn you. My senior, our sect elder, is on his way. He's a king-rank cultivator. When he arrives, you can forget about 20%. You might not even get 10 if you still value your lives. He paused for effect. You don't have long to decide. His temper makes Mafol in look tame. Before Ye Cheng could answer, a shaft of light tore across the sky. The blue-robed youth's smile widened. Too late to back out now. The light settled above them, crackling with power. Ye Cheng and Yuan Fei both tensed as they recognized the aura. A king-rank expert, Yuan Fei whispered, eyes narrowing. All around, the air vibrated with anticipation and dread. Chapter 51. When the blue-robed youth first mentioned this matter, Ye Cheng hadn't fully believed him. He thought it might be a ploy to snatch the lapis lazuli they'd mined. But now, it was clear the youth spoke the truth. Elder Bian. The blue-robed youth and his companions bowed deeply to the figure loitering above them. Elder Bian inclined his head in acknowledgement, then fixed his gaze on Ye Cheng and the others. A crushing aura rolled over them, making every breath a struggle. Honorable Elder, Yuan Fei gasped, the oppressive pressure weighing on his chest. I am the son of Qingluan Palace, a king-level sect in the South China Sea. For the sake of Qingluan Palace, I beg you, spare us. We will surrender every last piece of lapis lazuli we've mined. He invoked his sect's prestige in a desperate bid to cow the king before them. After all, Qingluan Palace was no minor force. Its master was on the threshold of attaining the heavenly king realm. If Ye Cheng joined their ranks, Qingluan Palace would instantly rise into the top 5, or perhaps even the top 4, among all the sects in the Wanyao Nanhai. Qingluan Palace? Elder Bian let out a harsh laugh. He'd never heard of that name. His own Yinju sect lay all the way in the North Sea, far from the south. Though not an imperial force, Yinju was nonetheless counted among the North Sea's premier sects, and its master had long since broken into the realm of heavenly king perfection. If Qingluan Palace were truly formidable, he'd have known of them. No, they must be a minor player. And if the sects backing Yuan Fei and the others weren't among those he dared not offend, then he could dispose of them without worry. Elder Bian's cruel smile widened as he raised his hand, ready to strike. But then he paused, his smile faltering. That robe. At his feet stood Ye Cheng, clad in a flowing azure garment embroidered with a single soaring phoenix. In that instant, something in Elder Bian's expression changed. Astonishment, respect, even a flicker of fear. The moment stretched on, and the clearing fell silent, as everyone realized this young man was no ordinary newcomer. Elder Bian studied the newcomer in front of him. He didn't recognize this woman, Ye Cheng, as she'd introduced herself, but the sect robe she wore felt oddly familiar. Had he seen it before? Then it struck him. At the front of the ancient palace. His heart skipped a beat. Back when he'd survived the beast tide as one of the few Xuanwang realm experts of the Yinji sect, he'd witnessed a peerless young man flanked by several disciples wearing the exact same uniform. That young man, Ye Cheng, had dispatched the palace guards with a single, terrifying sword stroke. They had called him the Supreme Elder, a title reserved for the very best of their sect. If Ye Cheng wore the same robes, she must be from the same lineage. A cold dread washed over Elder Bian. Thank the heavens he'd held back his hand just now. Any rash move could have dire consequences. The Yinji sect was hardly weak, but it was no match for a god king's power. And if Ye Cheng was more than a god king, if he truly was an emperor in strength, then the gap between them was virtually endless. Elder Bian forced himself to remain calm. He would bide his time and pray his sect could weather whatever storm was coming. Elder Bian drew in a slow, deliberate breath, waved his hand, and with 4 Yinji sect disciples alongside him, each one pulsing with faint light, vanished in an instant. When their auras finally flickered out, Yuan Fei, Ye Cheng, and the others let out a collective sigh of relief. Only moments ago they'd feared for their lives. Qingluan Palace still carries a lot of weight, Yuan Fei murmured, shaking his head. I thought we were done for, admitted another disciple. If senior brother Wen hadn't revealed himself in time, who knows what might have happened. They all remembered how those blue-robed Yinji monks had strutted in, brimming with arrogance, until they learned that Wen was the holy son of Qingluan Palace. Change had been instantaneous. Pride turned to panic, haughty smiles to disgrace, and suddenly they were the ones fleeing. The Qingluan Palace disciples clustered behind Yuan Fei exchanged triumphant glances, their expressions saying plainly, "This is what it means to be backed by Qingluan." Every so often, they shot pointed looks at the visitors from Chenqin Pavilion, as though reminding them where the real power lay. Ye Cheng, who had once thought senior brother Wen cold and distant, now understood just how crucial Wen's presence had been. Without Wen, and without his own timely arrival, these enemies would have shown them no mercy at all. "Let's go. There's no reason to linger here any longer." Yuan Fei spoke with unmistakable pride. The display just now should have changed Guqinger's opinion of me. After all, I am the saint son of Qingluan Palace, not some run-of-the-mill king-level disciple. Both Chenqin Pavilion and Qingluan Palace boast saint sons and saint daughters, but there's simply no comparison between Guqinger, the saint daughter of Chenqin Pavilion, and me, the saint son of Qingluan Palace. Guqinger only furrowed her brow and said nothing. But what about those elders? Were they really fleeing in terror at the mention of Qingluan Palace? I'd clearly seen Elder Bian's eyes flash with doubt and even a hint of scorn when Yuan Fei announced our lineage. And then, just as abruptly as his ridicule appeared, it vanished from his face. No matter how slow someone's reaction might be, it wouldn't stretch that long unless they were genuinely unnerved by our name. Sure enough, the reputation of Qingluan Palace held more weight than anyone had let on. Ye Cheng and the others exchanged uneasy glances. Unsure of the power they'd just encountered, they abandoned the last fifth of the lapis lazuli vein and withdrew with Yuan Fei and the Qingluan Palace disciples. Meanwhile, on the other side of the cave, the 4 Yinju sect novices, clad in their blue robes, stood in stunned silence. Elder Bian had appeared, led them away from the ore without explanation, and then simply departed. What had happened? Why had someone of Elder Bian's rank shown such fear? What sort of might did the Qingluan Palace wield? After a long, tense pause, the tallest blue-robed youth cleared his throat. Elder Bian raised a hand, his expression calm but solemn. "I know you have questions," he said softly. "It's time I told you why I left so abruptly." He drew in a steadying breath, then began to speak of the ancient palace he'd stumbled into months before, how its crumbling halls gave rise to a clawing, bestial tide, how silent, armored sentinels emerged from shadow, their eyes like burning coals, and most terrifying of all, how a single youth walked among them, so radiant and peerless that even Elder Bian had believed him the long-lost emperor. As the story unfolded, the truth of Elder Bian's fear became chillingly clear. By the time he fell silent, the disciples' doubts had melted into something far darker, awe laced with dread. When at last one of the young monks whispered, "The Emperor? Here?" Elder Bian simply nodded. "Yes, and from this moment on, you must tread very carefully." A tremor ran through the group as they absorbed the weight of his words, realizing that a power beyond imagination now shadowed their every step. Elder Bian frowned and asked, "But how does any of this relate to letting those people go?" He went on at length, yet none of his words seemed connected to what had just happened. Chapter 52. Elder Bian cast a quick glance at Ye Cheng and spoke in a low voice. "The handful of people shadowing that mysterious young man." He paused, then continued, "Their clothing is identical to the woman's we saw just now." At once, a cold realization swept through everyone. Qingluan Palace itself was a diversion. The true terror was the woman standing beside the saint of Qingluan Palace. A sudden unease gripped us. We'd been lucky the elders hadn't acted on their fear. If they had, the Yinju sect might have suffered utter ruin. Half an hour later, Wen Yufei, Ye Cheng, and the rest emerged from the lapis lazuli mine onto a broad, open plain. No sooner had they taken in their surroundings than a thunderous roar echoed in the distance. Hearts pounding, they stiffened. "Half-king beast, take cover!" Ye Cheng cried, and they all dove behind the nearest outcrop. Wen Yufei and the others scrambled for safety, knowing full well that a creature of that power showed no mercy. Saint's blood or imperial disciple alike, it would not hesitate to strike them down. As the half-king monster charged ever closer to Ye Cheng and his companions, 2 tiny figures suddenly appeared in its wake. "What? 2 children?" gasped Yuan Fei. Ye Cheng and the others froze in astonishment. By their size, the pair looked scarcely 4 or 5 years old, a little boy and a little girl, yet there they were, fearlessly pursuing the half-king beast. In the next instant, they recognized the siblings. The boy was Gu Qingchen, and at his side ran his younger sister, Gu Yunxi. After splitting from Yan Mengqi and the Lanyue Palace entourage, Qingchen had traced a familiar blood aura through the secret realm, and to his delight, discovered that Qin was his own sister. Before Gu Yunxi's very eyes, he produced a heaping pile of 4th-level red-silver stones, prized treasures he'd amassed during their expedition, and held them out. Gu Yunxi stared, speechless. Though she herself had collected no shortage of valuables, not a single one added up to 1/10 of her brother's red-silver stones. The sight of such wealth stirred an uneasy envy within her. Gu Yecheng's younger brother, Gu Qingchen, held a golden medal that automatically exempted him from combat, but Ye Cheng didn't have one. And you couldn't just summon an opportunity treasure whenever you felt like it. Since no treasure had shown itself, Ye Cheng had resigned himself to hunting monsters, big ones. All of them were mid-king rank beasts. If he couldn't strike gold, at least he could carve out experience by slaying these dangerous creatures in the secret realm. That's why the two brothers were now in hot pursuit of a mid-king monster. Technically, they both gave chase, but in reality, only Ye Cheng posed a genuine threat. The monster's one true fear was his blade. Qingchen hung back, heart pounding. Without Ye Cheng, that creature would have shredded him with a single swipe. And though the beast was fast, Ye Cheng was faster. When the distance closed to a few meters, Ye Cheng summoned his sword and unleashed a brilliant streak of light. The blade's radiance sliced through the air with a thunderous hum, and in an instant, the mid-king monster collapsed in a burst of petals and dust. Yeah! Qingchen couldn't contain himself and clapped so hard his hands stung. Big brother, that was amazing! Ye Cheng sheathed his sword, a faint smile on his lips. For monsters this powerful, Qingchen could only cheer from the sidelines, but with Ye Cheng on the field, they always had a fighting chance. Yu Wenfei and the others watched in stunned silence, their hearts pounding with shock. Facing a half-king level monster, no, even a 4th or 5th level Calamity Realm beast, they would have been forced to flee. Yet 2 4 or 5-year-olds had just slain this creature as casually as one might kill a chicken. What kind of world was this? Could anyone truly be safe? With practiced ease, Gu Yunxi slipped the monster's corpse into her storage ring, then turned her gaze to the trio huddled behind the rocks. Her spy, ritual sense swept over them, first-level cultivators in the Calamity Realm. It was impossible such novices could have gone undetected by her. She frowned. Could this young man be from my Gu family? She whispered. His blood power matched hers exactly, yet she'd never seen him before. The Gu clan in Jianglin City was small, she knew every member, and this boy, Gu Ye Cheng, was a complete stranger. Moreover, Gu Ye Cheng had only told his father about the Gu family's overseas branch on Wangqin Island, so Gu Yunxi had no idea that Jiang Lincheng wasn't the clan's only prodigy. It struck him as strange. Because Gu Yunxi and Gu Chen were suppressing their bloodline auras, Gu Qinger sensed nothing amiss. The two younger siblings were terrified of bumping into their own kin. If their parents found out they dared enter the Xuanhuang secret realm, the punishment would be severe. When Gu Qinger felt a powerful presence fix its gaze on her, she instinctively backed away 2 steps. Boom! A thunderous ripple of spiritual energy erupted from the west. Gu Yunxi, Gu Qinger, and the others whipped their heads in that direction. A treasure has appeared! Excitement lit up Gu Yunxi's face. His older brother already possessed a golden no punishment token, an amulet guaranteeing he'd escape any scolding, but Gu Yunxi hadn't secured one for himself. If their parents discovered that the two of them had ventured into the Xuanhuang secret realm, they'd be downright furious. True, his father had never actually struck him, but Gu Yunxi's heart pounded at the very thought of punishment. Now that a treasure had manifested, this was his chance to claim his own golden token and stay out of trouble. Isn't the combat-free gold medal event about to start? Let's go! Without a moment's hesitation, Gu Yunxi and her brother, Gu Ye Cheng, sprinted toward the source of the surging spiritual fluctuations. Gu Yunxi's eyes gleamed with anticipation. There must be an amazing origin behind these two young powerhouses, she murmured. Yuan Fei couldn't help picturing the fabled halls of the Divine Court Imperial Palace. Surely only such a transcendent foundation could produce beings of this caliber. "Come on, we have to see this for ourselves," he urged, falling in step behind them. Rumors of otherworldly treasures had drawn a crowd long before the siblings arrived. As Gu Yunxi and Gu Ye Cheng reached the edge of a hidden underground vault, everyone fell silent. From the darkness below came violent ripples of spiritual energy, so intense that even the earth trembled underfoot. Whispers rippled through the onlookers. Are those the two prodigies everyone's been talking about? Indeed, for weeks Gu Yunxi, hailed as the Dust Sovereign, and her brother, Gu Ye Cheng, who styled himself the Emperor of Xi, had been the region's hottest gossip. Rarely did they show themselves, but whenever they did, they made a spectacle. Now, gathered at the entrance of this secret palace, they stood poised to uncover whatever lay within, and everyone present knew they were about to witness something extraordinary. They looked no more than 4 or 5 years old, yet their strength rivaled that of a half-king in the robbery realm, especially the little girl. Watching them dispatch a half-king-level monster as easily as swatting away an insect was staggering. Had I not seen it with my own eyes, I never would have believed children that young could pack such power. Their reputation spread fast. Any monster, any hidden treasure, any scrap of spiritual artifact discovered in these caverns instantly became theirs. Other cultivators gave them a wide berth, afraid that the moment they uncovered something valuable, the two tiny devils would swoop in and claim it before anyone else even knew it existed. A short distance from the entrance to the underground palace, I, Gu Ye Cheng, caught the tremor of a powerful spiritual fluctuation. Since we'd exited the ancient palace, I'd long since separated from the Ninth Elder and the rest of the group. With my current cultivation, traveling alone was more efficient. Companions only slowed me down, and any help I might gain wasn't worth the risk of being held back. I advanced cautiously, every sense alert. The echoing drip of unseen water fell somewhere in the darkness ahead. My heart flickered with anticipation. Whatever lay beyond that flicker of energy could be a path to greater power, or a trap set by foes far stronger than these two legendary children I'd just witnessed. Either way, I was ready. Ye Cheng, brother? Gu Ye Cheng had barely stepped foot near the entrance of the underground palace when a familiar voice called out from behind. He turned, and there she stood, Gu Chinger. Chinger? His heart skipped a beat. This place, the Xuanhuang secret realm, was vast beyond imagining. He'd wandered its depths for days and met only the third elder. Never had he expected to run into someone he actually knew. Brother Ye Cheng, it really is you, Chinger exclaimed, rushing forward. Her normally composed, almost frosty demeanor melted away in an instant. The small gathering behind her, disciples from the Dust Heart Pavilion, envoys of Qingluan Palace, even Yuan Fei and his companions, watched in stunned silence. They knew Gu Chinger as an unapproachable beauty, ever cool and reserved. Seeing her so openly thrilled to reunite with Gu Ye Cheng took them completely by surprise. But now, all eyes were fixed on Gu Chinger as Gu Ye Cheng gently smoothed her hair. Her cheeks were flushed. She looked every bit the shy kitten, hardly the aloof saint lady they'd been told about. Yuan Fei's lips curled in a dark frown. So this was Gu Chinger's true nature. In truth, she'd never been cold or arrogant. She simply reserved that frosty dignity for everyone except him. Before this striking young man in white, she let her guard down completely and slipped into the role of the cutest little sister. This spot belongs to my sister and me. You'd better move along, Gu Chinger said softly, but with unshakable confidence. Just as Gu Ye Cheng and Gu Chinger shared a fond glance, a boyish voice rang out from the trees ahead. Hey, what are you doing here? There was something unmistakably familiar in that tone. Gu Ye Cheng spun around and froze. Even his iron will couldn't hide his shock. Standing before them was that insufferable brat, proud, defiant, and flanked by the sister whose reputation for invincibility was well known. Gu Qingchen. Gu Ye Cheng's face darkened, anger roaring up in his chest. Not far off, Gu Yunxi stood before his imperious brother, daring the surrounding cultivators to approach. Then something in the air shifted. He sensed a presence. Turning his head, he met Gu Ye Cheng's calm, unwavering gaze. At that moment, Gu Yunxi felt his heart skip a beat. He came perilously close to losing his composure. Chapter 53. Xiaochen. Gu Yunqi's voice trembled as she reached out to steady her brother's arm. Until moments ago, Gu Qingchen had been fearlessly driving off the encroaching cultivators. But now, he'd frozen in place, alarm flashing in his eyes as he turned to look at his sister. Gu Yunqi, normally so composed under pressure, was staring at something behind them with palpable terror. Puzzled, Gu Qingchen followed her gaze. After all, both siblings wore their father's life-saving jade talismans, tokens said to ward off any danger in the entire Xuanhuang secret realm. Nothing short of a disaster should have unsettled them so deeply. And then he saw him. Gu Yecheng simply stood there, his expression calm and unhurried. The sight of their long-absent older brother sent Gu Qingchen's head spinning. His face drained of color, mirroring the shock in his sister's eyes. Instantly, the cultivators around them parted like rippling water, creating a clear path toward Gu Yecheng. None dared to stay in his way. In the secret realm, if you hadn't reached the king realm yourself, crossing Gu Yecheng, or the two young prodigies beside him, was tantamount to signing your own death warrant. Silence fell over the clearing, broken only by the soft rustle of sleeves as Gu Yecheng stepped forward to join his siblings. Together again, they formed an unspoken unity, potent enough to still the hearts of every onlooker. Even warriors of the king realm wouldn't dare provoke those two recklessly. Despite their youth, their power was terrifying, and the forces backing them had to be formidable. A ripple of whispers ran through the crowd. What's going on? Looks like those two little terrors have set their sights on someone again. Heads turned as Gu Yunqi and her brother, Gu Chen, strode toward Gu Yecheng with fierce expressions. A few bystanders exchanged knowing glances, pity flickering in their eyes. That poor boy, one muttered. He must have crossed them before. Nobody fancied tangling with the Gu siblings. Across the courtyard, Yu Wenfei and the other Qingluan Palace disciples froze. A few Chengxin Pavilion cultivators tensed beside them. They'd all witnessed the siblings' strength, especially that prodigious girl, and they knew better than to underestimate them. As Gu Yunqi and Gu Qingchen closed the distance, suspense crackled through the air. Everyone braced themselves, certain the siblings were about to unleash their wrath on Gu Yecheng and his friends. But Gu Yecheng merely adjusted his robes and met their scowls with steady eyes, as if ready for whatever was about to come. Gu Qingchen dropped to her knees at Gu Yecheng's feet, clutching his calves as sobs racked her small frame. Beside her, little Gu Yunqi twisted the hem of her dress in both hands, her eyes downcast, as though she'd committed some terrible offense and dared not meet his gaze. The only sound that broke the tense quiet was their trembling voices. "Daddy! Daddy!" In an instant, those two words ignited shock across the courtyard. The cultivators who had just been honoring Gu Yecheng froze in mid-bow. Even Gu Qinger and Yu Wenfei, who had witnessed the girl's terrifying power only days before, stared in stunned disbelief. "Father," they murmured to one another. Gu Yecheng's children? It seemed impossible. After all, these toddlers, no more than 4 or 5 years old, had laid waste to a half-king-level monster with a single strike. Everyone had assumed the girls were scions of the Supreme Divine Court's imperial palace, perhaps even descendants of the Divine Emperor or the Heavenly Venerable. No one had imagined they were Gu Yecheng's own daughters. Gu Yecheng ignored the shocked murmurs of the onlookers and fixed his children with a dark look. "All right," he said quietly, "whose idea was this?" "Sisters," cried one. "Xiaochen's," retorted the other, Yunqi and Qingchen pointing at each other like rival commanders. Yunqi's face burned with anger as she jabbed a finger at her brother. "You're the one who begged to come. I only followed Beak. Oz, I was worried about you. Don't you dare lie to father. Are you asking for a fight?" She balled her small fist, poised to strike. Qingchen's lower lip trembled. "Aye." But in front of their father, he could find no excuse. Ye Cheng saw right through his hesitation. Under his steady gaze, the boy's bravado crumbled. He reached into his robe and produced a storage ring, offering it up with a forced, pleading smile. "Daddy, look, I found something cool. Please don't be mad, okay? I got so bored at home, I sneaked out to play." Qingchen's hurt expression briefly softened Ye Cheng's stern features into a controlled glare. Drawing on his divine sense, he probed the ring's contents. Inside were several common herbs and wild fruits, but tucked beneath them lay a small pile of glowing crimson-silver stones. Crimson-silver stones? Ye Cheng's brow tightened. That was no ordinary trinket. Fourth-level ore, enough to forge a king's weapon, was exactly what Ye Cheng had been searching for in the secret realm. For days, he'd scoured its winding caverns without so much as a single fragment. And now his son, Xianxia, was standing before him, holding not one, but dozens of glowing mineral chunks, enough to produce 3 king-class arms. Ye Cheng's anger dissolved in an instant, replaced by excitement. If they could enlist a 4th-rank weaponsmith to refine these ores, they'd soon possess 3 perfected king's weapons. With those blades forming the core of an immortal sword formation, their power would be unrivaled. "How did you come across so much?" Ye Cheng asked, his voice brisk but hopeful. "I'll explain everything, father." Relief rushed through Xianxia. He'd feared a scolding. He glanced at his sister, Xianxia, whose eyes shone with anticipation, then began, "After we entered the secret realm, we followed a trail of silver-armored stone figurines." "Silver-armored stone figurines?" Ye Cheng leaned forward, intrigued. "They were scattered along a hidden passage," Xianxia continued, "each one engraved with ancient runes. At the end of the corridor, we found a collapsed cavern, and these ores piled high in its center." "Fascinating," Ye Cheng murmured. He studied the glowing stones, imagining the weapons they would soon become. Then he shook his head, mildly admonishing, "You stumbled into danger following those statues. Next time, be more cautious." "Understood." Xianxia and Xianxia answered in unison, nodding vigorously. Father and children shared a quiet smile. With this trove of 4th-level ore at their disposal, the next phase of their plans was about to begin. As Ye Cheng prepared to lead the 2 little ones and Qinger into the underground palace, a brilliant shaft of light pierced the sky and settled directly above the entrance. "King Realm Expert," someone cried out. All eyes snapped upward. "It's him!" Qinger, Yuanfei, and the others immediately recognized the sovereign-level cultivator. He was the same Elder Bian of the Yinwu sect they'd driven off at the lapis lazuli mine not long ago, thanks in large part to the might of Qingluan Palace. Yuanfei still shuddered at the memory. If Qingluan Palace hadn't intervened, they would have met their end that day. Now, Elder Bian's aura blazed unchecked as he swept his gaze across the clearing. He acknowledged Qinger and Yuanfei with a curt nod, as though recalling their previous encounter, then flicked his attention toward the group's younger disciples. But his eyes didn't linger on them either. Instead, he fixed on the lone figure in white standing at their head. Ye Cheng felt his heart thud in his chest. He had been careful to conceal his identity, yet Elder Bian's sharp eyes betrayed him. Recognition flickered in the elder's expression. In that instant, the tension that had been building along the ledge crackled to life. Because if Elder Bian had truly remembered Ye Cheng, everything was about to change. Ye Cheng couldn't forget the young man dressed all in white. He had left a deep impression. "Senior, we meet again." Chapter 54. "Senior?" murmured the cultivators around them, exchanging stunned glances. They watched in disbelief as Elder Bian bent respectfully at the waist before Ye Cheng. If Ye Cheng were merely a bit stronger than Elder Bian, the guests might have regarded him as just another formidable senior. Yet to inspire such profound deference from a Xuan King-level master implied far greater power. Could he truly be a heavenly king? Quiet murmurs rippled through the crowd. Only a heavenly king, they reasoned, could command that level of respect from a Xuan king. But Elder Bian himself inwardly scoffed. A heavenly king? That wouldn't be enough to make me bow like this. No, this is the presence of an emperor. Standing beside Elder Bian, a striking young disciple of the Yinji sect, clad in flowing white robes, had witnessed the entire exchange. He stared at Ye Cheng in awe. So this was the supreme one. Elder Bian had spoken of before, the one whispered to be an emperor. And astonishingly, he was so young. Among the onlookers were Yuanfei and the other cultivators from Qingluan Palace, all equally shaken. They exchanged looks of incredulity. This was a level of power they had never imagined approaching their world. Yuanfei shot a quick look at Ye Cheng, then his eyes fell on the sect robes Qinger was wearing, and everything clicked. Heat rose to his cheeks as he realized the truth. All this time, he'd been telling everyone that Elder Bian had been driven away from the Lapis Lazuli mine by the Qingluan Palace. But of course that made no sense now. Elder Bian hadn't feared the Qingluan Palace at all. It was the Chenshin Pavilion he dreaded. And the proof was staring him in the face, those unmistakable robes on Gu Qinger. His earlier pride at thinking he'd protected Gu Qinger and the others from certain death turned instantly to shame. He'd been so convinced that without him, they'd have been wiped out by Elder Bian. In reality, it was the sight of Chenshin Pavilion's colors, worn by Gu Qinger, that sent Elder Bian running long before the Qingluan Palace ever showed up. How utterly backwards had he been? If Gu Qinger hadn't stepped in, Elder Bian would have slain them without so much as a second thought. Yuan Fei finally caught his breath and called across to one of the nearby cultivators, a lean, hawk-eyed youth in the theft realm. "Brother, you're from the Northern Sea, right? What can you tell me about the Yinju sect over there?" The young man glanced over with mild curiosity. After a moment, he drawled, "Yinju sect is one of the old Heavenly King tier orders in the Wanyao Northern Sea. They've even got a perfect ancestor at Heavenly King level guiding them." Perfect ancestor at Heavenly King level, Yuan Fei's eyes widened. No wonder such a powerhouse wouldn't blink at a minor South Sea palace like Qingluan. Ye Cheng exchanged a quick look with Elder Bian, then gave a subtle nod. "Let's move," he said. Gathering the two younger disciples, Gu Qinger, and the rest of the Chenshin Pavilion followers, he led them toward the vast underground palace entrance. Above the stone archway was a single, crisp inscription, 61. Ye Cheng paused long enough to register the number, then shook his head. No time for riddles now, and stepped into the yawning darkness beyond, his companions close behind. Ye Cheng held his breath as he stepped into the underground palace, immediately unleashing his spirit sense to scout for any hidden traps. Yet, despite their cautious descent, neither he nor the others encountered a single threat. To his surprise, the cavern was vast enough to hold thousands of people. Slender beams of sunlight filtered down through cracks in the ceiling, bathing the chamber in a gentle glow rather than plunging it into darkness. At the heart of the hall stood a flawlessly white stone stele, its smooth surface gleaming. "What is this?" Ye Cheng murmured. He'd heard only snippets about the Xuanhuang secret realm and had little idea what he was looking at. Then a name timbre led from his lips. Could it be the heavenly demon stele? Gu Qinger, who traveled with him, stiffened. She was a native of the 10,000 Demon Sea and knew far more about this realm than he did. "The heavenly demon stele?" she echoed, her voice laced with excitement. "It's one of the greatest boons the Xuanhuang secret realm can bestow," she explained, stepping closer. "Only a rare few can claim its power, and it doesn't even appear every time the realm opens." Her eyes shone as she stared at the pristine monument. "We're incredibly fortunate to have found it." Ye Cheng's pulse quickened. If this truly was the heavenly demon stele, the opportunity it represented could change the course of his destiny, if he could seize it before anyone else. One of the elders smiled as he motioned toward the stone door. "You've got luck on your side. There are 100 heavenly demon steles hidden throughout the Xuanhuang secret realm, and the 61 carved on this entrance simply marks this particular underground palace. To enter the trial, all you do is close your eyes and extend your consciousness to the stele. In an instant, you'll be drawn into the heavenly demon illusion, where hordes of extra-dimensional demons lie in wait. The layout of the illusion and the demon's strength will scale to your cultivation level. Every foreign demon you vanquish advances you a level and raises your final score. Top scorers claim the richest rewards. In short, this demon monument trial doesn't judge you by your realm alone. What truly matters is your personal strength and talent. If your cultivation is high, you'll simply face tougher demons. Ye Cheng arched an eyebrow. This heavenly demon monument trial is far more intriguing than I imagined. It works like this. Even cultivators at the true spirit tribulation realm can top the list, while those who've reached the half-king or full-king realm might find themselves ranked lower. Naturally, that arrangement isn't kind to practitioners whose power is skin-deep. Those who rely on elixirs to patch up their deficiencies. On the other hand, for genuine prodigies who break through realms with ease, It's the perfect stage to showcase their talent. Ye Cheng, look at the stone tablet, his brother murmured, pointing. A faint glow spread across the surface, and lines of text materialized. 1 Suli, score 5, East China Sea. 2 Cheng Yuexiao, score 5. 3 Q Chengfeng, North China Sea. 4 Chumu, score 4, West China Sea. All 100 slots had been filled. Each score represented the number of realm breakthroughs a cultivator had achieved during this assessment. Unsurprisingly, the East China Sea, the strongest of the 4 seas, claimed nearly 30% of the positions on the list. The 10,000 Demon Seas' 4 outer regions each boasted their own champions, ranked by overall strength. At the top stood the East Sea, followed in descending order by the North Sea and the West Sea. Bringing up the rear was the South Sea. Its roster on the Heavenly Demon Monument was sparse, and none of its representatives measured up to the great empires along its shores. The Han Qin Empire's showing was especially thin. Ye Cheng scanned the freshly inscribed names, frowning to see that not a single compatriot had yet appeared. Of course, this was only the trial's opening phase. With every passing moment, more prodigies would step into the arena. Their performances could just as easily knock today's frontrunners from their perches, reshuffling the entire monument. In the end, only the final rankings would matter. Ye Cheng felt no rush. His sister, Gu Qinger, had warned him that each contender had just one opportunity. There would be no do-overs, and only the conclusive result would count. Whether he began his trial now or later made no difference. A place on the monument hinged solely on one's true ability. Calm and collected, he settled in to wait for his turn. Ye Cheng studied the inscription beside the Heavenly Demon Monument. It outlined the words for the trial. First place would receive a drop of Xuanshui spiritual liquid. Second place, a shard of Wujin sand. Third place, a Gonlin pill. He paused at the top prize, Xuanshui spiritual liquid, a 5th-tier spirit substance, exceedingly rare. Even a single drop could propel a Xuanwang-ranked cultivator to the brink of the next realm, and for those already at the pinnacle of Xuanwang, it might finally break the barrier to Heavenly King. He closed his eyes for a moment, picturing that iridescent droplet. "I want it," he said softly. The second prize wasn't to be dismissed either. Wujin sand was a prime material for reforging a 5th-tier imperial weapon, worth a fortune in any sect. Ye Cheng glanced over at Xier, his trusted aide. "Xier, you'll handle the Wujin sand," he instructed. He gave one last look at the list. Ideally, he'd claim all 3 rewards, but beyond himself, the only person likely to challenge the top 3 was Gu Yunxi. A faint smile curved his lips. He was ready. No, there was no chance. Ye Cheng was certain that no one could threaten his hold on second place. Even the woman in the green shirt he'd met at the entrance to the Xuanhuang secret realm posed no real challenge. She might be listed among the spiritual prodigies, but her natural talent still fell short of Gu Yunxi's, let alone Gu Qingchen's. Chapter 55. A few weeks passed, and by the time nearly every prodigy and powerhouse in the Xuanhuang secret realm had completed the trial, the rankings on the Heavenly Demon Monument finally settled. The top 10 read: 1. Ye Chengfeng, 37 points, East China Sea. 2. Shangguan Li, 36 points, East China Sea. 3. Li Shenzhen, 36 points, North China Sea. 4. Zhuo Qing, 35 points, West China Sea. 5. Bai Shuanger, 35 points, West China Sea. 6. Qujing, 35 points, East China Sea. 7. Meng Hansong, 34 points, North China Sea. 8. Huo Ling, 34 points, East China Sea. 9. Leng Xing, 34 points, North China Sea. 10. Hua Mingyu, 33 points, West China Sea. Of the top 10, 4 hailed from the dominant East China Sea, indeed, both first and second places. The North and West Seas each boasted 3 representatives. The South Sea, however, remained shut out. Not a single cultivator from that region cracked the top 10, and only one, the saint disciple of the Zhenwu sect, the South Sea's premier school, managed to place among the top 100. Chapter Tsengs. The rankings revealed. Ye Cheng stared at the list in disbelief. 91st place, nearly the bottom. A heavy silence fell between him and Gu Qinger, who stood beside him with equally downcast eyes. She'd always known the South Sea lagged behind the other 3 great seas, but she hadn't expected the gap to be so vast. Beyond the East, West, and North Seas lay several smaller empires, any one of which boasted multiple names on this prestigious ranking. The South Sea, by contrast, had only a single representative, Gu Qinger herself. The Han Qin Empire, Gu Yecheng's own homeland, fared almost as poorly. Its lone entrant, Jiang Baiwei, had scraped in at 93rd. Jiang Baiwei, Gu Yecheng scoffed, though his lips twitched with reluctant respect. He despised her personally, but her talent was undeniable. Awakening a spirit body was no trivial accomplishment. Her place on the list was well earned. Far below them, deep within the Xuanhuang Secret Realm's 37th underground palace, cultivators buzzed with excitement. Jiang Baiwei's face flushed as she absorbed her ranking, tension flickering in her eyes. The competition had only just begun, and already the seas and empires were laid bare for all to see. Not far in front of her stood a young man, the pride of the Kongjun Empire, Tong Xingye, the holy son of the Seven-Star Sect. The Kongyun Empire shared borders with the Han and Qin realms, and for generations the three nations had been locked in bitter rivalry, punctuated by repeated clashes and open warfare. At the heart of the Han-Qin alliance sat the Jiang family, whose long-standing feud with the Seven-Star Sect ran deep. On the renowned Demon Monument, Tong Xingye occupied the 87th rank, several spots above Jiang Baiwei. Two other disciples from the Kongjun Empire had also earned places on the list, at 94th and 99th, but Jiang Baiwei was the lone representative of the Han-Qin Empire. A mocking smile curved Tong Xingye's lips as he leaned forward. "The Han-Qin Empire's greatest young prodigy?" he sneered. "Is this all they have to show for themselves?" His followers laughed derisively. Only one name on the entire list? How utterly pathetic. The assembled warriors from the Han-Qin Empire bristled with shame and anger. One by one, their faces reddened as Tong Xingye's taunts cut through the tense air, leaving no doubt that today's contest would be about more than mere martial prowess. It would be a bid for pride and honor. Jiang Baiwei wasn't the only Han-Qin disciple gathered in Underground Palace number 37. There were dozens of them crowding the chamber. At Tong Xingye's remark, they all shot him furious looks, but not one dared speak up. Flanking Tong Xingye was a King Realm cultivator from the Seven-Star Sect. Beside Jiang Baiwei stood her own clan's King Realm elder. Neither side would risk a rash move in such a public venue. Any clash here would spark outrage, so they resorted to words alone. And yet the Han-Qin disciples found themselves powerless to argue. Tong Xingye's name sat above Jiang Baiwei's on the official ranking list, despite her reputation as the empire's foremost young prodigy. Of the 3 slots on that list, 2 were held by Tong Xingye and his ally. Only one belonged to the Han-Qin Empire. Even so, Jiang Baiwei still trailed behind. Tong Xingye's confidence shone in his slight, condescending smile, and the Han-Qin monks could only grit their teeth in silence. At that moment, an unfamiliar figure stepped into Underground Palace number 37. She wore a simple green tunic, yet the unadorned garment could not disguise her natural poise. The moment she appeared, murmurs rippled through the assembly of monks, especially among the younger men. To Jiang Baiwei, her beauty rivaled that of his fairy-like junior sister. If Gu Yecheng had been present, he would have recognized her at once, as the same green-clad cultivator he'd glimpsed outside the Xuanhuang Secret Realm. Unfazed by the curious gazes, Suzaku strode calmly toward the heavenly demon monument, which rose on lotus-shaped steps at the heart of the underground palace. She paused briefly to scan the engraved rankings, then closed her eyes and spread her spiritual sense outward, a clear signal that her trial was about to begin. A charged excitement filled the air. This woman in green was undeniably stunning, but how formidable was she? Could she break into the coveted list and claim a place among the realm's elite? All eyes followed as Suzaku prepared to test her fate against the monument's ancient power. Chapter 56. When Suzaku finally opened his eyes and stepped out of the trial chamber, a tense hush fell over everyone gathered below. All heads turned toward the towering demon monument, waiting for the rankings to settle. 1 heartbeat, 2, 3. Just as some began to whisper that the ethereal youth wouldn't even appear on the list, every name below the top spot shifted down by 1. Among them was Gu Yecheng, who had held first place until this moment. Then, blazing across the summit of the monument in golden script, came 3 simple words. First place, Suzaku, score 49, Lingxiao Holy Academy. 49 points, murmured the assembled cultivators beneath the 37th floor of the underground palace. Suzaku had cleared 49 levels of the demon trial, a staggering achievement. Everyone knew how each successive floor intensified the danger. Even a genius like Ye Cheng had stopped at the 37th. No one had ever breached the 40th level, much less soared beyond it. Until now. A collective gasp rose from the crowd as they stared at Suzaku in awe, the reality of his unprecedented feat sinking in. She was not only breathtakingly beautiful, but astonishingly powerful. Lingxiao Holy Academy? Someone murmured. I've heard of it. One of the 4 holy academies of the spirit realm. Could she really be a genius from there? That would explain everything. Even out here on the fringes of the spirit realm, far from its bustling core, news of Lingxiao's reputation had spread. One of the 4 holy academies? Another voice whispered in awe. Most people here had never set foot in such exalted schools, but few would forget that title. Do you think she's Suzaku, the prodigy on the spirit list? Someone else ventured. That level of talent could never emerge from our Wanyao Sea, scoffed a fourth. How on earth would a spiritless genius wind up in this backwater? Their confusion was palpable, and not without reason. Virtually every name on the spirit list belonged to disciples of the overlord tier sects at the realm's center. They rarely, if ever, ventured so far afield. Why would one come to a place like this? The Wanyao Sea and the empires that line its shores lie at the southernmost, most remote edge of the spirit realm. By all logic, a spirit list prodigy shouldn't ever wander here. After all, every monster on the spirit list is backed by a mighty force, each one supported by an imperial-level secret realm. Even Emperor Xuan, extraordinary though he is, shouldn't be able to draw a spiritless genius into this backwater. The onlookers were simultaneously awed and baffled. But Suzaku ignored their whispered doubts. He lifted his gaze to the floating number before him. 49. A solid score, just 1 point shy of 50, the threshold at which a demon attains the perfection of the Xuanwang stage. He had no chance against such power. In only 3 exchanges, he was utterly defeated. A collective breath was released among the crowd. If that had really been a spiritless genius, they'd feel far less reassured. After all, the geniuses on the spirit list are nothing less than world-class figures in the spirit realm. Should one ever descend upon the 10,000 demon sea, they'd lay waste to everything in their path. Huh? Before anyone had time to recover from Suzaku's astonishing performance, the demon monument trembled again, and every name on the list slid down 1 place. What? A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. If only second place Ye Cheng had slipped a notch, it would have been startling, but not earth-shattering. Yet now, every single competitor had dropped, including Suzaku herself. They had all assumed her record was unbreakable once the secret realm's doors closed. Even Suzaku stood frozen in disbelief. She knew better than anyone how brutal the 50th level was. No one survived more than 3 rounds there. And yet someone had. All eyes turned to the newly crowned champion as the top spot shimmered into view. First place, Zhang Lianxin's score, 71. Han Qin Empire, 71? A cultivator finally croaked, voice thick with incredulity. They cleared level 71? Not 51, not 61, but 71. Suzaku's eyes widened as she stared at the heavenly demon monument. A single name stood at the very top, its level glowing in crimson numerals, 71. That was more than 20 tiers above her own rank. Even as one of the prodigies on the spirit list, she knew all too well how excruciating it was to break past level 49. Yet here it was. Someone had effortlessly shattered that ceiling, and then some. Beside her, Jiang Baiwei felt her pulse skip. She blinked once, twice, convinced she'd simply misread the inscription. But when she refocused, the characters remained unchanged. Zhang Lianxin. There was no mistaking it. A duplicate name? She wondered. After all, in such a vast world, 2 people could share the same surname and given name. But this particular Zhang Lianxin hailed from the very same Han and Qin empires as her own blood, her sister. It was a staggering coincidence. And yet, hadn't her sister always been utterly talentless? How on earth had she climbed to the pinnacle of the heavenly demon monument? With her spirit bones shattered, she should have been doomed to spend the rest of her life in the Gu household of Jianglin City, bound to young master Ye Cheng with no hope of freedom. Could her bones really have been restored? Even if they were, her innate talent was, at best, equal to my own. How then could she have ever conquered the 71st level of the demon trial ground, something that even Suzaku, a prodigy atop the spirit rankings, has yet to achieve? A flicker of hope stirred in Jiang Baiwei's chest. I just hope it's nothing more than a coincidence, she whispered to herself. If this Zhang Lianxin truly turned out to be her sister, the blow would be earth-shattering. Meanwhile, Tong Xingye of the Seven Stars sect in the Kongyun Empire was focused on a different detail. He squinted at the 4 bold characters that followed the latest score. Han-Chin Empire? He read them again, disbelief warring with curiosity. Chapter 57. The Han-Chin cultivators burst into jeers. Our Han-Chin Empire is trash, you say? Then what about your Kongyun Empire? Trash squared? Worth less than actual garbage. They couldn't help but picture Tong Xing's scornful laughter from before. Now that Zhang Lianxin had claimed the top spot on the Heavenly Demon Monument, the Han-Chin's pride was through the roof. They seized the chance to mock their rivals mercilessly. Across the courtyard, Kangyun disciples glared in fury, but no retort came. The facts spoke for themselves. Not only had Han-Chin outstripped Kangyun, it had eclipsed every other power, even the formidable forces of the East China Sea. When Zhang Lianxin's name appeared at number 1, the shock rippled beyond the confines of the 31st Underground Palace, reverberating throughout the Xuanhuang secret realm. After Suzaku, himself the first outsider from the 10,000 Demon Sea to conquer the Heavenly Demon Monument, no one from outside the 4 seas had reached such heights. And now, astonishingly, the second was another Han-Chin disciple. Such a complete reversal of expectations had never occurred before. For cultivators across the Han-Chin Empire, today's announcement was nothing short of a sensation. Never before had anyone from their realm broken into the top 10 of the celestial ranking trials, much less claimed the very first seat. Historically, the 10,000 Demon Sea sects had filled nearly every spot, squeezing out even the most gifted of the empires. Yet here it was on the scroll. First place, Zhang Lianxin. A stunned hush fell over the audience, then rippled into a dozen excited conversations. Zhang Lianxin? Isn't she the daughter the Jiang family cast aside years ago? I remember her. Before Jiang Baiwei rose to fame, Lianxin was our empire's greatest prodigy. Then the Kanglan Holy Land revoked her spirit bones, and she just disappeared. Rumor says her family abandoned her, and she was married off to some minor city lord. No one thought she'd ever return to cultivation. But look at that, first place. Has her spirit bone been restored? For many Han-Chin disciples, memories of Zhang Lianxin's early promise still ran deep. And now, against all odds, she had not only re-emerged, she had outshone them all. They never imagined Zhang Lianxin's return would be so spectacular. She didn't just come back, she stormed straight to the top of the Heavenly Demon Monument, outclassing prodigies and powerhouse warriors from the 4 seas and several empires, and claimed the number 1 spot on the 71st floor of Underground Palace number 61. Guqinger and the others stared in disbelief at the rankings. She actually did it, Guqinger whispered. 71st floor, all the Tianzhou beaten, who could ever surpass that? Just then, Guqinger caught sight of her husband, Ye Cheng, standing beside their 2 children. A thought flickered through her mind. Perhaps this record wasn't unbreakable after all. After all, Ye Cheng needed no introduction, and their children, by all accounts, were prodigies in their own right. "Daddy, it's Mommy," the twins shouted, bouncing up and down. "Mom is number 1. Yeah," they cheered, arms raised in triumph. Their unexpected announcement sent a ripple of astonishment through everyone present, members of Qingluan Palace, delegates from Yinju Gate, and all the onlookers. "Mom?" they murmured, eyes wide. In that instant, Guqinger realized Zhang Lianxin's astonishing feat was even more extraordinary than anyone had thought. When everyone realized that the woman who'd crushed all the prodigies and topped the leaderboard was the mother of these 2 youngsters, Ye Cheng's wife, their jaws dropped. This family was unbelievable, each member more remarkable than the last. "Let's begin," Ye Cheng said with a gentle smile as he closed his eyes to center himself. "Yunqi, I'm sorry, but you won't hold first place for long." "Sis, I promise I'll make the top 3, his elder son, Gu Qingchen, chirped, giving his sister Guyunxi a confident wink. I don't believe you, she replied coolly. For Xianxia to crack the top 3, he'd have to outshine not just his father and brother, but his mother as well. His talent was impressive, but against competitors like these? Humph, you're underestimating me. We'll see about that. Xianxia shot back, fire in his eyes. Next up, their younger sister, Gu Qinger, announced breathlessly, "It's looking like this family might sweep the top 4 spots." She drew a slow, excited breath as everyone prepared for the trial to begin. Soon, the renown of this family would send ripples of astonishment across the 4 seas and the great empires. When Ye Cheng opened his eyes, he discovered he was no longer in the familiar underground vault, but standing in a realm of chaos and swirling energies. Before him loomed an enormous figure, if it could even be called figure. Standing nearly 5 meters tall, its skin glowed a deep blood red. Its shape was vaguely humanoid, yet disturbingly alien, as if plucked from the most unsettling of horror films. "Is that a demon?" Ye Cheng muttered under his breath. On Tanshuan continent, tales of the outer demon were etched into every history scroll. Ages ago, these invaders had poured through dimensional rifts, subjugating the land for centuries. Even the continent's strongest cultivators, those of the same realm, had found themselves utterly outmatched. Only a handful of prodigies ever stood a chance against an outer demon, and even then, the outcome was far from certain. This crimson giant before Ye Cheng, however, did not possess the full might of a true demonic entity. Instead, it flickered and shimmered like a projection, an illusion crafted to intimidate rather than to annihilate. Yet despite its spectral nature, its aura crackled with formidable power, enough to threaten any ordinary cultivator. Ye Cheng squared his shoulders. Though the apparition was weaker than the legendary outer demons of old, it remained a deadly foe. He drew upon his own reserves of spiritual energy, feeling the familiar hum of his cultivated meridians awaken in response. The battle in this chaotic realm was about to begin, and Ye Cheng, heir to a rising power, would not back down. Ye Cheng stood alone in the trial arena, sword in hand, as the next demon projection solidified before him. Its aura was unmistakable, a perfected outer demon at the mid-stage of Xianxia cultivation. No wonder so many challengers had failed at the very first level. How could an ordinary cultivator hope to stand against even a mere projection of such a fiend? Yet here he was. A sharp hum split the air. One effortless slash later, the demon crumpled to ash. Projections of mid-stage Xianxia demons had faced human Xianxias 1,000 times, but never such a swift defeat. Before Ye Cheng could blink, the outlines of 2 more mid-stage Xianxia demons flickered into being. Their combined power was daunting, but to him it was no different from the first. He advanced in a blur, sword whistling through both forms in a single sweep. Level 2, cleared. Then came Level 3, Level 4, Level 5. Each stage unleashed ever stronger demons, first matching Ye Cheng's own mid-stage Xianxia refinement, then scaling up to perfected Xianxia, and finally reaching the terrifying heights of the Heavenly King realm. Still, to Ye Cheng, even a Heavenly King demon was nothing but practice fodder. With each step, his blade danced quicker, his aura burned brighter, and the projections dissolved like mist. Level after level fell behind him, until only the final trial remained, and with it, the promise of a true challenge at last. After a long silence fell, Ye Cheng sheathed his sword and surveyed the clearing. He'd just cut down 6 Heavenly King-level perfected demons in a single stroke, yet no new fiends emerged from the swirling void. He had expected a God King-rank adversary to test him further. Was this really the end? A flicker of disappointment stirred in his chest. Just as he turned toward the fading light of the trial chamber, the air before him wavered. Slowly, an ethereal figure took shape, a woman of breath-stopping beauty, clad in flowing robes that seemed spun from moonlight. Atop her dark hair sat an ornate phoenix crown, its jeweled crest glinting like stars. Her features were so exquisitely proportioned, so serenely noble, that Ye Cheng found himself momentarily lost in her gaze. Even his wife, Zhang Lianshan, who was famed for her elegance, could not match this woman's otherworldly grace. Instinctively, Ye Cheng reached out, expecting to feel the warmth of living flesh, but there was nothing. No pulse, no breath, just the chill of an illusion made manifest. The Phantom Queen gave him a measured glance, her violet eyes widening in genuine surprise. You actually broke through the heavenly demon monument? Her voice was soft as mist, yet carried the authority of ages. Ye Cheng recovered himself and bowed his head slightly. Who are you? A faint, enigmatic smile curved her lips. My name is Lan Qingxuan. In the outside world, they revere me as Xuanhuang. Xuanhuang? He frowned, intrigued. Then you must be the master of this secret realm. Lan Qingxuan inclined her head, her phoenix crown shimmering with eldritch light. Indeed, few mortals have ever succeeded where you have. Welcome, Ye Cheng. In that instant, Ye Cheng realized this encounter marked not an ending, but the beginning of a far greater trial. Ye Cheng's eyes widened. So she's the true master of this secret realm. Xuanhuang, the legendary emperor of the 10,000 Demon Sea from 1,000 years ago? Emperor Xuan shook his head slowly. I am Emperor Xuan, but not the ruler of this realm. The real master here is the heavenly demon. At the mention of that title, his tone turned icy. It was the heavenly demon emperor who sealed me within these confines. Ye Cheng frowned. What happened to that heavenly demon emperor? He's dead, Emperor Xuan replied quietly. I slew him right here in this secret realm. A shadow passed over his face, but the victory cost me dearly. Xuantian Palace was obliterated, and my body was lost. All that remains of me is this soul, bound to the heavenly demon monument. He paused, gaze shifting to Ye Cheng with unexpected warmth. I believed I would be trapped here until the end of time. Thank you for your help. Chapter 58. Emperor Xuan's voice rang out through the silken gloom of her throne room. She is sealed within the heavenly demon monument. The only way to free her is for someone to ascend every level and conquer its final trial. Ye Cheng's face tightened. That's simply impossible, he said. The monument lies hidden in a realm so remote that no genius or powerhouse in the spiritual domain would ever find it. Even if they did, none could survive its last level. There is no one in the entire domain with that strength. Emperor Xuan's violet eyes glinted as she considered him. Very well, she replied. In exchange for your obedience, I will grant you one request. Ye Cheng lifted an eyebrow. A request? Then how about this? You follow me for 100 years. For the first time, a flicker of genuine surprise crossed Emperor Xuan's face. She leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. I think you should reconsider. He tilted his head, amusement dancing in his eyes. Oh? And why's that, Your Majesty? Her gaze turned unreadable. Because no mere mortal could endure a century in my presence without perishing. The air crackled between them as two formidable wills clashed, each weighing the other's challenge. Beyond their standoff, the fate of the sealed woman remained suspended, her only hope resting on the impossible trial of the heavenly demon monument, and on the bargain these two sovereigns were about to strike. Ye Cheng smiled. Do you think me unworthy? Emperor Xuan shook her head, her expression thoughtful. Your breakthrough of the heavenly demon monument proves your talent beyond doubt. Yet, although your soul escaped its seal, your original body was destroyed long ago. Reforging it will take a century. By then, with your potential, you'll have soared to new heights. Why would you need my protection? A year. At most a year. And I can rebuild your body, Ye Cheng said confidently. He'd been drawn to Emperor Xuan ever since running her aptitude through his system. Her talent was astonishing, surpassing even the prodigy Zhang Lianxin. Had he not crossed paths with the heavenly demon emperor so long ago, he might already be a heavenly venerable today. And if he and Emperor Xuan ever had a child, the very thought made him blush inwardly. 1 year? Emperor Xuan repeated, her violet eyes fixed on him. Had anyone else made such a claim, she would have dismissed it out of hand. But Ye Cheng was no ordinary man. He had proven himself on the heavenly demon monument itself, and in that she found reason to believe him. Xuanhuang had once stood as a towering figure among the divine emperors millennia ago. Over the countless ages, she had witnessed untold prodigies rise and fall, and yet she herself was the greatest genius of her era. Even so, she admitted to herself that no ordinary talent, however extraordinary, could ever have penetrated the deepest chamber of the heavenly demon monument. Very well, she said softly, I promise you. Ye Cheng had done her an immense favor. Though he had served at her side for only a century, a mere heartbeat in the lifespan of a divine emperor, his courage and loyalty had earned him this reward. In recognition of his devotion, Xuanhuang entrusted him with the monument's ultimate trial, a crucible designed to temper his soul. As for Xuanhuang, she remained bound within the monument's ancient walls. Although the sealing spells that held her captive had been broken, her spirit was too weakened to escape, much less to enter her own hidden domain, the void of Xuanhuang. She vowed that once she obtained the legendary elixir capable of restoring her true body, she would tear a small rift at the entrance to her secret realm, just large enough for Ye Cheng to slip through. He bowed in acknowledgement, though his true intentions ran far deeper than simply claiming her as an ally. Ye Cheng's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment everything felt wrong. Cold stone beneath him, and an oppressive silence, broken only by the distant echo of dripping water. Above him towered the demon monument, its surface etched with countless unblinking eyes that seemed to watch his every move. He forced himself to focus. Legend said that when Xuanhuang disappeared and Xuantian Palace was destroyed, those events were the work of extraterritorial demons. But the truth was even more astonishing. Xuanhuang had not been slain. He'd been sealed alive inside this very realm, entombed within the demon monument itself. Still dazed, Ye Cheng glanced at the glowing leaderboard projected against the cavern wall. 1. Gu Yunxi's score 96, Han Qin Empire. 2. Jiang Lianshin's score 71, Han Qin Empire. 3. Gu Qingchen's score 60, Han Qin Empire. So the two young masters, Gu Yunxi and Gu Qingchen, had both completed the trial and earned places on the Heavenly Demon Monument. One sibling had soared to the 96th level, while the other reached the 60th. Unsurprisingly, neither could surpass Gu Yunxi and Jiang Lianshin, a fearsome mother and daughter duo whose divine inheritances are the stuff of legend. The elder boasts a 9th-grade golden divine body, the daughter a 1st-grade golden holy bone. Pulling himself up, Ye Cheng's heart pounded. If even they could conquer the trial, then perhaps there was hope yet for him. But first he would have to understand the full power of this demon monument, and the price Xuanhuang paid to be sealed within it. Determination flared in his chest. Whatever lay ahead, he would see it through. It wasn't that Ye Cheng himself wasn't formidable. It was that his sister and mother were simply off the charts. Whispers rippled through the crowd as Gu Yunxi's fingertip hovered over the Heavenly Demon Monument sensor, and the indicator shot up to level 96. Level 96? That monument must be malfunctioning, someone muttered. After all, Suzaku, the unrivaled genius topping the spirit list, had only ever reached level 49. Gu Yunxi, Ye Cheng, they have to be from the same sect, another speculated. A Gu family? Said someone else. Never heard of such a powerhouse. A hidden clan, maybe? From the Han Qin Empire, no less, a third voice scoffed. When did Han Qin get this strong? Across the various empires bordering the Wanyao Nanhai, Han Qin was always viewed as middling at best. Now, 3 terrifyingly skilled cultivators had appeared out of nowhere, and all hailed from that very empire. It was almost too much to believe. What made it even more absurd was that no one realized Gu Yunxi and Ye Cheng were both under 3 years old. If they'd known those monstrous levels belonged to toddlers— "Daddy! Daddy!" A high, excited cry cut through the murmurs. The crowd froze. There was no way a baby's voice could belong to someone nearing level 100. Yet Ye Cheng's gleeful shout left them with no choice but to accept the impossible. "I'm awesome!" Yunxi threw back her head with a triumphant grin and dashed over to her father, Ye Cheng, eager for praise. He ruffled her dark hair and smiled down at her. "You did splendidly, Xier, truly worthy of being my daughter." Yunxi scrunched up her nose in mock indignation. "Daddy, are you praising Xier, or are you praising yourself?" He chuckled. "Only you, of course." Just then, Ye Cheng spotted his younger son, Qingchen, standing a little apart, shoulders hunched and eyes cast downward. Kneeling, he scooped the boy into his arms. "And you, Xiaochen, you're amazing too." Qingchen's lip trembled. He'd always felt less gifted than his sister or his mother, and this gentle reassurance made the gap sting even more. Sensing his son's lingering disappointment, Ye Cheng gave a discreet wave. "But look what else I've brought." On the ground beside them, a tiny civet cub blinked up, its sleek fur bristling as it took in its surroundings. Qingchen's eyes lit up at the sight of the orphaned creature. Ye Cheng had discovered the cub in a dense forest while traversing the secret realm. Its parents lost not long after its birth, He'd held on to it, waiting for just the right moment. "Can I keep him?" Xianxia whispered, reaching out with careful fingers. Ye Cheng nodded. "He's yours, my boy. I think he could use a family." The cub let out a soft chirp and nuzzled into Xianxia's chest. At last, the little boy's face brightened into a shy, grateful smile, and in that moment, father and children felt their small family grow a little closer. He didn't want to take it with him, but the little creature kept trotting at his heels. Figuring that Xia and Chenner would love this furry companion, he finally scooped it up. Wow, what an adorable civet! Gu Yunxi's eyes lit up, and he, along with Gu Qingqian, reached out to stroke its soft fur. "Come on, let's go." With the civet safely in hand, Gu Ye Cheng led Gu Yunxi, Gu Qinger, and the rest out of the underground palace. There was no need to hang around. Their trial rewards would automatically appear in their storage rings and bags once the Heavenly Demon Monument trial concluded. Just as Ye Cheng turned to leave, the inscriptions on the Heavenly Demon Monument shimmered again. Everyone who had been below second place slipped down one rank, including Gu Yunxi, who had stood in the runner-up spot. Then, at the very top of the monument, a new name flashed into view. First place, Gu Ye Cheng. Score 290, Han-Chin Empire. A roar of astonishment swept across the secret realm at that moment. Chapter 59. Deep within the Xuanhuang secret realm, in a hidden underground palace, Zhang Lianshan stared at the names carved into the Heavenly Demon Monument and bristled with irritation. Gu Yunxi, Gu Ye Cheng, those two little rogues. Their names were proof positive that they'd slipped into the secret realm without telling her. She took a breath to calm herself. Still, they should be beside their husbands by now. No need to fret too much. Sure enough, Gu Yunxi and Gu Ye Cheng had appeared on the monument almost simultaneously, which meant they were traveling together. Zhang Lianshan's eyes softened as they fell on the topmost entry, Gu Ye Cheng. So many emotions swelled in her chest. Pride that this exceptional man was her husband, gratitude to her dear sister, Jiang Baiwei, for arranging the match, and relief that he was safe. But before she could dwell on those thoughts, a thunderous roar shook the chamber. Stone pillars cracked and toppled, and dust filled the air as alarms wailed throughout the palace. Zhang Lianshan's pulse spiked. "They've discovered us. Level 290? Are you sure there isn't an extra 0 in there?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. They couldn't believe their eyes. Gu Ye Cheng's level had shot all the way up to 290. What they didn't realize was that 290 was the absolute ceiling of the Heavenly Demon Monument. He hadn't cheated, he'd simply reached the very top. "Gu family again? Where on earth does this clan come from?" someone whispered, voice edged with envy. On the giant translucent display before them, 3 of the top 5 challengers already bore the Gu surname. Gu Ye Cheng in first place, Gu Yunxi in second, and Gu Qingqian in fourth. The competitor in third place, who appeared unrelated, was in fact another hidden scion of the Gu family. In other words, 4 of the top 5 were Gus. The only exception was Suzaku, a renowned genius from a different household. Deep within Underground Palace number 37, Jiang Baiwei studied the list in stunned silence. "Gu Ye Cheng," she breathed, heart pounding. A long-suppressed memory snapped back to life. Wasn't the young master of the Gu family in Jianglincheng called Gu Ye Cheng? He had once been dismissed as a hopeless waste, less talented even than the least gifted of the Jiang descendants. And now, he'd not only caught up with every spiritual prodigy, including Suzaku, but had soared past them all to claim the top spot. Waste? If Gu Ye Cheng was a waste, then what did that make the rest of them? Chapter X. The Gu family's unexpected rise. Zhang Baiwei's emotions churned as she scanned the list. When she saw Gu Ye Cheng's name among the ranked disciples, a strange mix of surprise and resignation overwhelmed her. She hadn't expected to find any familiar names here. After all, 2 years ago, the Gu household in Jianglin had been modest at best. Now her own sister, Jiang Lianshan, not only appeared on the list, but had even elevated her husband, Gu Ye Cheng, into the higher ranks. Clearly, things had changed dramatically at the Gu estate. Once the trial was over, Jiang Baiwei decided she'd pay them a visit on her way back. She needed to see this for herself. The final phase of the Heavenly Demon Monument trial had concluded, and the rewards were apportioned strictly by ranking. Gu Ye Cheng's party had secured 2 prized items, the Xuanshui spirit elixir, and a cache of Wujin sands. No sooner had the rewards materialized than the two younger disciples, the little ones, as he fondly called them, scrambled forward to present the spoils to their master and father. Standing before his children, Ye Cheng's stern expression softened. They were his sons and daughters, after all. Was it not fitting that he show gratitude for their efforts? He nodded in acknowledgement and accepted the gifts graciously, though his eyes lingered most on the pouch of Wujin sands. That commodity, he knew, was invaluable, if only it could be refined. But here lay the rub. Even with the finest raw materials at his disposal, refining Wujin sands to their full potential required an alchemist of the 4th tier at minimum, and ideally, a 5th tier, emperor-level master. Such expertise was rarer than phoenix feathers in the entire spirit realm. Ye Cheng studied the grains of gold-hued sand in his palm, determination hardening his features. This journey into the secret domain had yielded unprecedented gains, but it had also shown him the limits of his current reach. To unlock the sand's true power, he would have to seek out those legendary refiners, most likely at the heart of the spirit realm itself. A new plan formed in his mind. First, ensure the family's stability in Jianglin. Then, set course for the capital, where resources and high-level masters congregated. Only by securing a 5th-tier alchemist could the Wujin sands be perfected, and only then would Ye Cheng and his disciples truly stand among the spirit realm's elite. The Han and Qin empires, and even the distant sea of 10,000 monsters, seemed like worlds away now that their trial at the Heavenly Demon Monument was finally over. 3 days had passed since Ye Cheng and his companions entered the Xuanhuang secret realm, and they had scarcely realized how much time had slipped by. Then, without warning, a powerful suction pulled them back to the mortal world. The world snapped into focus around them. The warm breeze, the scent of flowers, and, most comforting of all, the familiar presence of Zhang Lianqin and Gu Yuan. "Dad!" Ye Cheng sprang forward, relief flooding his voice. "Shiner!" Gu Yuan's deep laugh echoed across the courtyard. Flanking Ye Cheng were 2 small figures, his young wards, alongside his sister Gu Qinger and the others. In an instant, they all stood before Zhang Lianqin and Gu Yuan. "Mom." Ye Cheng dipped into a courteous bow. The 2 little boys, caught between pride and guilt, scurried behind him, peeking out at Zhang Lianqin with wide, anxious eyes. At the sight, Gu Yuan couldn't stifle his amusement. "Oh, you 2 little troublemakers," Zhang Lianqin chided gently, though her lips twitched in a reluctant smile. "You've given your mother quite the scare." She knelt gracefully and reached out to examine each child. Their cheeks were flushed, but there were no wounds, nothing more than dirt-smudged robes and wild hair. Relief washed over Zhang Lianqin's face as she straightened up and tucked a stray lock of hair behind one boy's ear. "All of you are safe," she murmured, her voice soft. "That's what matters most. Let's head back to Chenxin Pavilion first." Ye Cheng frowned, scanning the empty space around him. None of his companions' familiar auras were present. Had they not yet exited the Xuanhuang secret realm? Or had they slipped away before him and already returned to the pavilion? He needed to know how matters concerning Mu Zi were being handled, and since they were merely passing through, there was no harm in finding out. But before he could set a course, their small group entered a deserted stretch of sea and was abruptly halted by 4 strangers. At the front stood a woman whose cultivation had reached half-king tier. Behind her, 3 men exuded unmistakable kingly might, and one elderly figure clad in ink-black robes shone with an even greater power. He had broken into the Heavenly King realm. Ye Cheng's heart skipped a beat. While the Heavenly King realm might not rank at the very apex in the other 3 seas, here in the South China Sea, the weakest of the 4, such strength sat undisputed at the summit. In fact, only the illustrious Zhenwu sect, celebrated as the foremost order across these waters, could boast practitioners who had advanced beyond even Heavenly King to the Divine King realm. In the vast reaches of the South China Sea, the Heavenly King sect was all but unrivaled. Yet as Ye Cheng and Zhang Lianqin made their way back toward their ship, a chilling disturbance in the air stopped them cold, an aura so wicked it could only belong to the demonic paths. "They're from an evil sect," Ye Cheng warned, eyes narrowing. On a craggy outcrop ahead stood a group of cultiva, Tors cloaked in shadow, their expressions twisted with malice. At their head was a breathtaking woman whose beauty seemed sharpened into cruelty. She fixed Zhang Lianxin with a single, contemptuous glance. "Run," the woman called, her voice smooth as silk and twice as deadly. "But don't expect to get far." Ye Cheng slid a hand to the hilt of his sword, stepping protectively in front of Zhang Lianxin. "Sheener," he asked quietly, "do you know her?" Zhang Lianxin's gaze darkened with old resentment. "I know her painfully well. We collided in the secret realm, each of us vying for the same treasure. I defeated her and nearly killed her. She only escaped by dragging 3 half-kings into the fray. For 3 straight days they hunted me." She let out a short, bitter laugh. "If Ye Cheng hadn't given me that jade talisman to save my life, I'd be dead now. And she promised she'd chase me to the ends of the earth and make me regret crossing her." The gorgeous woman's lips curled into a cruel smile as her fellow disciples advanced. The brewing storm of hostility spoke volumes. This feud was far from over. Ye Cheng stepped out of the shimmering gateway and froze. Not only had she tracked him down beyond the secret realm's borders, she'd come flanked by 3 mortal kings. Their presence alone spoke of her hidden power and far-reaching influence. The woman's dark eyes glittered with triumph. "Run? Who said I'm going to run?" At her side, Zhang Lianxin smiled coldly. "Husband, deal with her. Kill her." Ye Cheng's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. Despite all he'd endured in the secret realm, he felt no fear. He met the woman's challenge with steady calm. "You really think I'd be afraid of you now?" Zhang Lianxin laughed softly, savoring the moment. In strength, she and her husband far outmatched this lone intruder, especially with 3 kings at her command. With that unspoken boast hanging in the air, she beckoned. Ye Cheng said nothing more. In one fluid motion, he drew his sword, its blade humming as it cut through the tense air, and then he lunged forward. Chapter 60. A pure white sword light tore through space like a blade of dawn. The moment it swept free, the 3 king-level masters guarding the enchanting woman froze in shock. Even the heavenly king-level expert among them couldn't hide his alarm. "Not good," one of them gasped. They sensed death's approach the instant the light streamed forth, but what could they do? Ye Cheng's sword was said to fell a god-king with a single strike. There was no outpacing its speed. Though their minds registered the danger, their bodies simply couldn't respond in time. Helpless, they watched as the radiance obliterated them. Where the sword light passed, reality itself warped. Below, the once placid blue sea was rent open in a trench miles long. In one swift motion, 3 kings fell, one of them a heavenly king. Silence engulfed the spectators from Chengxin Pavilion. Gu Qinger, normally resolute, stood rooted to the spot, her cheeks drained of color. She had seen warriors fall before, but never so effortlessly, so utterly. Shock left her utterly speechless. It was the first time any of the Chengxin Pavilion disciples had ever seen Ye Cheng unleash his true power. 3 king-stage cultivators, complete masters of the heavenly king realm, had charged in with full confidence, and now, in less than a heartbeat, they lay obliterated at his feet. Even the sect's revered supreme elder, reputed to rival the patriarch himself, had fallen without so much as a groan. Only one enemy remained, a beautiful yet deadly female cultivator, her body trembling as she stared at the impassive figure before her. She had come seeking vengeance on Zhang Lianxin, and thought herself clever enough to strike when the pavilion was distracted. But against Ye Cheng's cold, precise swordplay, there was no corner for her to hide. Fear coursed through her veins as she realized the true cost of her ambition. "Senior, she stammered, her voice cracking. Regret flooded her eyes. She wishfully mouthed Zhang Lianxin's name, perhaps hoping for mercy in that final moment. With a single, silent motion, Ye Cheng drew his sword again. The blade flashed like a falling star, and her plea was cut off, erased as cleanly as if she had never existed. "No matter who you are," he said softly, gazing at the empty air where she had fought so fiercely, "you must die today." Setting the sword aside, Ye Cheng turned to his fellow disciples. As quickly as the skirmish had begun, it was over. Nodding once, he led them away from the desolate clearing. Without another word, they departed to return to Chengxin Pavilion. Back at the pavilion, Third Elder bowed respectfully before the pavilion master and the Grand Elder, then proceeded to recount everything he'd witnessed in the secret realm. He described each trial, each confrontation, and, above all, the moment Ye Cheng cut down a palace guard with a single, flawless sword stroke. At first, the elders sat in stunned silence. The pavilion master's face went pale. He had always known his disciple was powerful, but he'd never dared guess just how powerful. Had Ye Cheng reached the late-stage Xuan King? The peak Xuan King? Those had been the pavilion master's wildest speculations, until now. According to Third Elder, Ye Cheng's strength was such that even a God King cultivator would fall before him without a second thought. What realm of power was this? Half-step emperor? A full emperor? The two elders exchanged bewildered glances, unable to find words. Nearly 12 hours later, their small convoy finally landed on the shores of Xianxia Island. As everyone prepared to enter Xianxia Pavilion, Gu Yuan paused and called Gu Qinger to his side. "Qinger," he said, "you will accompany Lady Gu back to Wangqin Island. It's time you met your father, the head of the Gu clan." Ever since he'd discovered her Gu family bloodline, Gu Yuan had treated Qinger almost like a goddaughter, and now at last he intended to make the bond official. Ye Cheng's arrival on Xianxia Island caused quite a stir. No sooner had his aura been detected than the pavilion chief and one of the elders hurried out to greet him. "Prepare a secluded chamber for me," he commanded. "I intend to retreat for a while and focus on cultivation." This recent expedition into the Xuanhuang secret realm had paid off handsomely. First among his treasures was a single drop of Xuanshui spiritual liquid, an extraordinary 5th-grade elixir coveted even by emperors. Alongside it lay the Gonlin pill, another 5th-grade treasure whose purifying properties could cleanse spiritual impurities and sharpen one's inner power. Though not quite as potent as the Xuanshui liquid, it was nonetheless invaluable. In addition to these precious items, Ye Cheng, Gu Yunxi, and Zhang Lianxin had gathered a wealth of high-grade spirit herbs and medicinal materials. Ye Cheng planned to refine them all into core-stage pills during his retreat. With his cultivation now solidly in the mid-Xuanhuang stage, the time was ripe for him to break through to the next level. Before withdrawing, he divided the single drop of Xuanshui spiritual liquid into 4 equal portions, one each for himself, for Zhang Lianxin, for Gu Yunxi, and for his younger brother, Gu Qingchen, ensuring that every member of the Gu family would benefit from their hard-won spoils. Ye Cheng slipped away to Xianxia Pavilion to begin his secluded cultivation. Meanwhile, the moment Jiang Baiwei emerged from the secret realm, she hurried straight to Jiang Tianwang and the Jiang family patriarch to relay everything she had witnessed at the Heavenly Demon Monument. At first, both of them were stunned into disbelief. How could Zhang Lianxin, the very girl whose spiritual bones had been shattered, possibly ascend that fearsome peak? In theory, fractured spiritual bones could be mended, but only by a master at the venerable level, or an alchemist of Danzun rank. Being so rare, they might not even exist in the entire spiritual realm, let alone within the borders of the Han-Qin Empire. And even if Lianxin's bones were restored, her talent would still only match Baiwei's. How could she then overtake the brightest prodigies on the heavenly demons list? Jiang Baiwei's next words stripped away their last doubts. "There's more," she said quietly. "Alongside Lianxin, the Gu family's young master, Ye Cheng, has also appeared on that list. In fact, 2 other members of the Gu family made it as well." At that revelation, both Jiang Tianwang and the patriarch fell silent, the weight of her news sinking in. "The odds of this being a mere coincidence are vanishingly small," the Jiang family patriarch murmured. "Once we return home, I will visit the Gu clan myself. Only then will we learn the truth." 3 days later, a terrifying aura rippled across Dust Heart Island. From the lowliest mortal to the highest disciple of the Dust Heart Pavilion, every eye fixed on the pavilion's mountain gate, the source of that overwhelming power. Inside the pavilion's inner chamber, Ye Cheng stirred. As he cracked open his eyes, his aura surged and crystallized. In an instant, a mere quarter drop of Xuanshui spirit liquid had propelled Ye Cheng's cultivation from peak mid-Xuan King all the way to the perfect late Xuan King stage, leaping over the late Xuan King realm entirely and placing him one step from the Heavenly King threshold. Simultaneously, he had refined the Spirit Sword King-grade weapon he'd retrieved from the secret realm. At long last, The Zhuxian sword formation boasted a genuine 4th-level, king-grade spirit sword. Ye Cheng closed his eyes and focused on the flow of his spirit qi. Before his recent breakthrough, and before he sacrificed the sovereign blade, he judged his strength to be on par with an average emperor. Now, however, he had not only ascended to the pinnacle of the late Xuan King realm, but had also incorporated his sovereign blade as the core of the Zhuxian sword formation. The surge of power coursing through him left no doubt. He had surpassed ordinary emperors by a wide margin. He opened his eyes and turned to Zhang Lianshin, whom he called Jinner. For the first time in a long while, a genuine smile touched his lips. Shinner, just give me a little more time. I promise you, I'll take you back to Konglan Holy Land and avenge everything you suffered. He seldom spoke of revenge in her presence. Her pain was still too raw, but he had never forgotten it. Those memories had driven him relentlessly forward these past 2 years. Zhang Lianshin's eyes glimmered, a mixture of hope and sorrow reflecting in their depths. No matter how strong she became, she had been powerless to stop the horrors inflicted on her home. Ye Cheng, though now a late Xuan king, understood that true justice would only come when Kanglan Holy Land itself was wiped from the map. Kanglan Holy Land was famed as one of the southern spiritual domain's top sanctuaries. It wasn't unusual to find emperors there, but rumors spoke of a mysterious queen of heavenly kings who ruled in secret. In the king realm, there were 3 tiers, early, middle, and late, and in the emperor realm, practitioners advanced through Xuan Emperor, Heavenly Emperor, Divine Emperor, and at the summit, Holy Emperor. Standing at the peak of the late Xuan King realm, Ye Cheng knew he still had a long way to go before confronting the greatest powers of Kanglan, but he would close that gap, no matter the cost. The chasm between realms was even wider than that separating the king realms. Ye Cheng couldn't be certain he could face the Heavenly Emperor head-on, and the Queen of the Heavenly Kings would almost certainly be overpowered. Just a little more time, he muttered. Once I break into the Divine King realm, Kanglan Holy Land's downfall will be inevitable. With renewed determination, Ye Cheng emerged from seclusion.